Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a look at the water grand trines that are going to be developing throughout October through December of this year. As you can see, we have about 4 different phases of these grand trines that are going to be taking place throughout. So we'll look at each of those in turn and the particular kinds of energies that those are going to be bringing in phase by phase. So this is all underpinned by the trine between Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. What's really fascinating about their alignment right now is that they're both switching direction right around the same degrees and right around the same time. As you can see on the screen here, we have Saturn retrograde in October, and we have Jupiter is direct. There's no retrograde sign here. So Jupiter will be turning retrograde on the 11th of November, and Saturn will be turning direct on the 29th of November. And they'll both be doing that at 25 degrees of their respective signs. So what we have here is a really close pass where they're going to stay within about a degree of each other for quite some time. And we just discussed that in the previous video where we looked specifically at the trine between Jupiter and Saturn. Now, this is really helpful, just to recap, this is really helpful for getting things on track. This is really helpful for making sure that things are sustainable, that there is steady growth, that our plans are straightened out, that our priorities are clear. In all of our own particular charts, this is pointing to 2 different houses that can show us a specific type of area of life that we should be focused in on around this period of time, because there's a lot of opportunity to get that really clear, to get that moving in a way that's going to work out for us long term. So I just discussed that in the most recent video. And today we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of the fact that we have a bunch of planets also moving through those late degrees of Scorpio, which we can see up at the top right of the chart here. So in this picture, we have Mercury and Mars. We will also get the Sun coming through here. Mercury will go retrograde and will wind up meeting up with Venus in that area of the sky as well. And then Venus will move on. Mercury will turn direct on the 29th of November, and it will do so pretty much at that trine point with the other planets, and then that will start to move on as well. So on a personal level, what's, again, really wonderful about this, and we'll see this as we go through sign by sign, is that when we get these grand trines, they're pointing to a specific kind of an energy that we should be focused on. And we're getting help then also from that third side of that triangle with the more day-to-day details, working up our passions, working up our sense of being able to show up in this area on a day-to-day basis and build up those themes that are going to help us out long term. So we're going to have time stamped at the end of this video, all of the different rising signs, and I do definitely recommend checking for your whole sign house rising sign. If you want to adjust that for a different house system, that is perfectly fine. If you want to check for your sun sign, that's also perfectly fine. But if you look at just your rising sign, these will fall into those specific whole sign houses in your chart, and that should resonate on a very literal kind of external events level. Now, additionally, because I'm sure that there are some people who are going to ask for specifics here about when is the date that this perfects. I'm giving ranges here because, for one thing, all of the trines from the planets to Jupiter are going to happen about a day or 2 before the exact trine to Saturn until they switch, and then it's going to be to Saturn before Jupiter. Really, this is a broader theme that's going to be developing throughout this whole period of time. And as we can see here, the Mars-Mercury phase of this is going to last with an orb of about 4 or 5 degrees from approximately the 22nd to the 31st of October. We'll get a little bit of a break. The sun will be in this area of the sky from about the 13th to the 21st of November. And then right on the heels of that, Venus starts to creep up on this area of the sky just as Mercury retrograde is going back into Scorpio, and they will be in that area of the sky then from the 22nd to the 29th of November. As I mentioned, on the 29th of November, then Mercury winds up going direct, and it will trace back through that area of the sky through to about the 9th of December. So the significance of these grand trines taking place in water signs, this is going to be acting upon an emotional, spiritual, creative, intuitive, imaginative aspect of the collective as well as ourselves personally, wherever it is that we have the water signs aligned with specific houses in our charts. We're also likely to see a lot of themes of water coming up collectively. So in the news and things like this, stories around water, either consumption or too much of it, water storms, things like this, as well as themes of emotional well-being, healing, sense of connectivity with others, sense of like spiritual morality, care, comfort. But with some of this energy, as I will point out, there's one major thread that can go to a bit of a rougher side here, which is in-grouping and out-grouping, protectiveness, worry and risks of something that is going to disrupt that care, that comfort, that sense of belonging. So in-grouping, out-grouping is the major downside of these kinds of grand trines, just because there's not much to get in the way of that energy, as we'll see as we go through these, especially on the front end of this when we have Mars coming through here. And finally, one last thing that I will say about grand trines in particular is that it doesn't force you to take action. It's not necessarily going to force your hand to utilize it. It's a highly potent energy that you can utilize, but there does need to be some impetus or some drive that is applied to this as well. So that is something to keep in mind. We may need to try to actively utilize this, and I would highly recommend that we do, because grand trines, when they are activated, when we do intentionally utilize them, they can do absolutely wonderful things, and there's a lot that can just kind of get out of the way when we're dealing with a grand trine. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at each of these different phases one by one. So with the grand trine to Mercury and Mars, as we can see, Mercury winds up, it comes up behind Mars and it winds up catching up to it and passing it, and they'll move into Sagittarius together before Mercury winds up turning retrograde and coming back through here. But with these energies, we're dealing with matters of assertiveness, matters of identity, ego, energy, intention. And we also get that clear kind of dividing line between this is me and that's what's outside of me. Mars and Scorpio can be quite protective. It can also be really very, very fixed on specific kinds of goals. So one thing I will say with this on a personal level for all of us, no matter where this falls in our specific charts, but this is going to have us really driven, really focused on specific goals and achieving those things. So there's this kind of ambitious clearing the way toward a specific goal or intention or something that we're applying our energy to it in a highly focused manner. Now with Mercury in the mix as well, this is going to be our thought process, our communication, our ability to connect with others. This is the day-to-day thinking things out, planning things through, especially that trine between Mercury and Saturn is very practical. It's focused on solutions. It's focused on what's the correct way to do something. And so with all of these energies working together through this period of time, 22nd of October through the end of October, there's this energy of seeking safety, seeking security, seeking a sense of cohesion, coherence, connection, meaning. There's a desire to know where we're at and what it is that we're working with. Now, some of us may wind up going to extremes with this. That is something that can happen when we're dealing with that Mercury-Mars conjunction anywhere, but particularly in Scorpio, is there can be looking out for threats, thinking that like your cycles, your mind cycles, what you're focused on can be risk aversion and recognizing threats, looking for them, where maybe they aren't necessarily. So in terms of getting into negative cycles and things like this, that is a potential here, and that is something that I would recommend veering away from a bit, because I think that that can waste some of this energy, basically, on things that may not really be a problem. So try not to just focus on problems, try to focus on solutions. this can also do that quite well as long as we are exerting our will over it in that way. So plans, measured action, there's this ability with these energies, with mind, energy, long-term planning, and goodwill, good intentions, good expectations, to create a sense of momentum and belief-based motivation, belief in oneself, belief in the energy that one is bringing to bear. And so as long as we're staying in our own lane, this should provide a major boon to meaningful practice, meaningful activity, and again, those long-term plans that we're trying to sort out through this time. This can also really help to get you in touch with why you pursue what you do. And that's also immensely helpful with this, to focus in on that and to allow for that to be the scorpionic kind of focus, rather than if that veers off in different kinds of ways. There could even be many that struggle to accept that others are allowed to believe differently than they do. There may even be some strange little things that we see of attempts to enforce correct thought or aggression shown by those becoming explosive over viewpoints and beliefs. That's one thing that we tend to see in the water signs quite a bit, is that sense of belief, particularly when the foundation we're working with is a Piscean Saturn and then Jupiter and Cancer there. So the belief around what it is that we're doing and that we're thinking is going to be really significant here. And really trying to keep that in our own lane, I think, is going to get the best out of this alignment for us. One thing that this is going to be fascinating to watch with this alignment, this is conducive to accountability, without a doubt. Now, this doesn't mean that we're not going to see some people continue to behave in ways that would require a sense of accountability or a reckoning or something like this. Not at all. This actually, with astrology, we're dealing with an energy basically, and we're likely to see both sides of this, where there's nothing really getting in the way of that Mercury-Mars conjunction working through Saturn and Jupiter to create an impact of that negative thought cycle, that negative kind of intentionality that I was mentioning there, which we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a moment. But there is also here the ability to create accountability. It's not just that Mercury and Mars are acting upon Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter are acting not only upon that Mercury and Mars, but particularly that Mars. So if there has been untoward actions, emotional appeals, emotional manipulation, psychological manipulation, things like this, especially then psychological manipulation, adding that Mercury back into that mix, there can be some really fascinating accountability along these lines, and especially where that has violated a sense of empathy, consideration, humanity. So I think we're going to see both that peeling away, peeling off into the weird direction that we've been kind of seeing recently, but I do definitely feel like there's a wonderful opportunity, and I really think that we're going to see accountability along those lines as well. So for past things, we're going to see some kind of a reckoning here. But again, I want to remind, that doesn't mean that this is stopped in its tracks. This is a grand trine, and that activity can still continue to go on. So the calculating nature of this, that how do I apply my pressure in just the right way to affect a certain outcome? Again, staying in our own lane, that's wonderful. If we're doing that when it comes to the minds and intentions and fears and instincts of other people, to twist those up, that is also a possibility here. So keeping our minds really clear. I think this would also be really cool for utilizing the purging aspect of Scorpio too. So purging the mind of fear, becoming really fearless, relying upon that Saturn and Pisces and Jupiter and Cancer of, we always wind up coming back to, things do wind up correcting themselves. Things do wind up coming back to some sense of reasonability, which is something we tend to see with the trine between Jupiter and Saturn anywhere. But purging the emotions of any sort of manipulations that have taken hold that would be a really wonderful way to utilize this and really powerful. But yeah, ultimately, this is also super effective for emotional appeals. So that can also go both ways. If there's something where an emotional message really needs to be brought across to people, this can be very helpful for making that appeal and having that be effective. But again, keeping in mind, looking at the other side of that coin, there is potential for manipulation and for people taking matters into their own hands, especially people who are in a negative thought cycle. That can cause that Mars to wind up coming out physically or literally aggressively. Another thing with Scorpio, though, and with that Mercury Mars, is that there's going to be a desire to get to the heart of things. So we may find ourselves kind of rabbit holing quite a bit, trying to dig into things, trying to understand them better, trying to uncover secrets, doing a lot of digging and research and things like this to try to uncover a bigger picture, to try to understand and put the pieces together on what's actually going on here. So that can be really cool and really effective. I think that for journalists, this is going to be really interesting. We may see some fascinating stories come out about lies and secrets, manipulation, backroom deals, things like that. But just keeping in mind, maybe not staying up all night in a rabbit hole. Sometimes we can take that to extremes as well. Or we can see patterns that aren't necessarily there with the Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, reaching out to these bigger picture belief-based alignments as well. So we may see more things along the lines of what we saw recently, where some people were putting pieces together to say that the world was ending and so on and so forth. So some people will go to extremes in that way. Just try and make sure that you're kind of grounded with what it is that you're digging into, always kind of checking back and making sure that you're taking your mind out of that at times as well. And also, how does it make you feel to have your mind in certain places? Do you feel like you're actually getting to the bottom of something, or does it drive up a sense of fear, that fight or flight response, things like that? That's always good to watch out for when we're dealing with a lot of Scorpio energy. And finally, with these, I would not be surprised to see some new rules or some rules enforced. We have the rule enforcer Jupiter Saturn alignment here. And then with Mars coming through here, we could see that through policing or through surveillance, even with Mercury and Mars up there. So that can go in a couple different directions. One thing I would say is maybe let's try not to be flippant with what we're doing and saying and thinking. I hate to give that kind of a message, but I think it's worthwhile because there is that ability. Jupiter, Saturn, government, the rule makers, the lawmakers, Mars coming through and doing it, the work of those for it, but in Scorpio. Again, making sure that we are kind of staying in our own lane. And I don't mean that to say to censor yourself necessarily or things like this, but just making sure that we genuinely want to be putting out there what it is that we are, because I think it's weird terrain right now. And so with this coming through, I do think that that specific issue that I am kind of dancing around right now, and sadly I will kind of continue to dance around these issues for the foreseeable future, but I do think that that aspect is going to get hyped up a bit under this influence. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, fortunately, Mars winds up moving on relatively quickly. It's not going very slow right now. And so from about the 13th to about the 21st of November, what we're dealing with then is the sun. And again, with this, we do get a double kind of an energy here. Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, this is leadership. This is directives. This is a sense of power over self and others, but it is also sunlight. So having some sunlight come through specifically this area where we just had that Mars-Mercury conjunction, I don't think that it'll be long before we start to discover what is it that Mars and Mercury were doing behind the scenes in this place. And there's another interesting aspect to all of this, which is that when we're dealing with Sun, Jupiter, Saturn kind of leadership, this is bigger than really any person. So it looks a bit like some kind of divine intervention. Now, there will be a coronation kind of aspect to this, certainly. But where it is that larger than human forces need to intervene, I think that this is an open door to that. So that's hopeful, I think. Additionally, look at how close this is when the sun is coming through. This is absolutely incredible. We have a range between these three of 9 minutes. So from 6 minutes, 25 and 6 minutes to 25 and 15 minutes. This is absolutely incredible. And then the sun is smack dab between them. So this is all perfecting kind of right in this moment. This is as close as Jupiter and Saturn are getting at this point. So this looks absolutely huge. So huge focus on leadership, plans, steps, directives for the future. I have little doubt that we're going to be looking at solar figures a lot during this period of time for leadership, certainly. And there will be an opportunity, a moment where genuine leaders, good leaders, considerate leaders can shine if they step up. No, I think that's kind of a question as to who it is that would actually wind up stepping up during this time. But if they do, I think that this is that kind of coronation, that crowning, that recognition of something ethical and considerate and thoughtful, genuine and kind of worthy, basically. If there's any chance of that stepping up at this time, this looks highly protective to someone like that. There's also major themes of legal authority, legality, and leadership. So we may see a lot of court decisions, things like that coming through, judgments, and really high visibility on all of these issues of institutional governance. And solar figures, yes, leaders of countries, certainly, but these are people who would incline, especially by position of their role or their title or whatnot, would be in a position of being seen. So that's what a solar figure is. We can even have celebrities in this kind of a place, religious figures, people that we tend to focus on, that we tend to look to. And one thing that is just so fascinating and very clear about this to me is that there's this double-sided, utopic, dystopic kind of an energy that's coming through here. That sun is in Scorpio. Now, that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but what the sun will do there is point out the things that are untoward, the things that are getting in the way, the things that are a genuine problem, that the seedy underbelly. It will focus on that. So it will draw that up in some ways, but it also brings that out for that kind of sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of an aspect of it as well. So how can we imagine that leadership would be? How can we imagine that our institutions would be? I think there's going to be a double focus on that hope, as well as where we're falling short of that. So the state of governance, of leadership, of where we stand right now is really on display at all levels here. Like I said, coronation, crowning, recognition. I don't know why, but this is speaking to that. I don't know who that would be, but I would expect specifically that energy to come through in some way. Again, accountability with these three. These are the solar system heavy hitters here. They all have themes of ethics, right action, right intention, and they all do represent figures in the world that we look to for corrective action, for accountability. But again, on some levels, we will see some delusions of grandeur. Certainly, this could be a self-coronation in some cases. And what's interesting is I also feel like this is broad and kind of beyond just leadership. So we may see, like I was saying with the Mercury-Mars conjunction in this place, right? So there could be someone who decides to take action on their own. That was a theme that I was picking up from that thread. If they decide to take action around this period of time, they may be very much in the news for having taken a specific action. And there could be then that delusion of grandeur coming up of, I am taking action upon this and I'm going to solve this with some potentially really crazy action that someone's taking. That at this point now we're all talking about it. On a personal level, this is so wonderful for alignment, for utilizing power over oneself, for willpower, and for directing one's focus on what is my purpose? What am I doing here? And then planning that out and cementing that, crystallizing that into Saturn as well. It's very cool on a personal level. However, again, there is also that utilization of power over others. I hate to say, a lot of this is going to be a double-edged sword. It usually is when we're dealing with a grand trine. There are such wonderful aspects of it, but these can be misused. So there's also the ability to make a huge impression, to have a really lasting impact. And if people are doing that in a really correct and wonderful way, if people are using the position that they have for some great, very human impact, that's going to make a really big impression. But it won't just be the good actions that make an impact on people. So whoever is taking up a lot of space during this period of time, they will be having an impact upon people. So again, utilizing that purging aspect of Scorpio as well. What impact are the not so great people having upon us personally? Looking at that and trying to release some of that as well, just for the sake of our own well-being. Now, finally, this is also really excellent, again, for defining our own goals, for looking at our aspirations, our ambitions, and seeing them through, seeing how we can, not just what are the pitfalls, how is this not going to work? No, this is focused on what resources do I have available to me to get me to whatever next steps lie between me, where I am, and who it is that I'm trying to become. So how do I take those steps up? That ladder, that staircase is definitely going to be provided by Saturn and Jupiter here to that sun. Also really wonderful for self-reliance, self-motivation, both emotionally and practically. So getting our energy good and then getting our actions to follow up on that as well. There's also an energy of sovereignty here. So as a personal value for many, but also as a topic of discussion. So again, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to wind up kind of entering the discourse, the conversation here, but I think that's also going to be a big topic. What does it mean to be sovereign? This could be on a national level. This could be on a personal level. This could be speaking about rights and freedoms and things like that as well. Prerogatives. That's another just huge thing when we're dealing with these three energies. So moving on to about the 22nd to the 29th of November, notice that this is immediately on the heels of when the sun winds up clearing through this area. This image here is kind of in the middle of this alignment, but around the 22nd, I want to point out that Mercury is right at the last degrees of Scorpio coming back in, and Venus is starting to creep into this area from the other side. So they're narrowing in and then crossing each other. So with Venus coming through here, there's a financial aspect that winds up playing into all of this as well. So alliances, too, when we're dealing with both Mercury and Venus, what we're dealing with is connections with other people, groups, similar preferences, like-minded people, dialogue, understanding, messaging, civility, ideals, lightening up the mind as well. This is significantly different. It's still in Scorpio, but it is significantly different than what we were dealing with Mercury and Mars here. Now we're dealing with Mercury and Venus. This is that lighter-hearted, let's veer into this kind of positive direction here. Let's lean in that way. This is also highly creative, intuitive. So we're going to be dealing with all of those themes throughout this period of time. But yeah, financial strategic alliances, how people are coming together along those lines of like-mindedness, or alliances that make sense in terms of interests. So where do your interests converge with others? That can be on a national level, that can be international, that can be on a personal level with those around you, working together toward those ends. We may find a lot of us people that we love to work with, people that we love to connect with, that we love to plan things with, that have kind of similar goals throughout this period of time, which is very cool. But I do have to say the markets are likely to be in the news. There's also a valuation, kind of an aspect to both Mercury, which evaluates things, and then Venus, which speaks to the value of things as well. So what is the true value of something? That's being reassessed with that Mercury in retrograde there, reassessing the value of things. So we may absolutely see stock markets, for instance, the overstretching, the overpushing of certain industries. I won't call them all out, but I think we know some of them that are way overvalued. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see at least a lot of news around how that's too high, how that evaluation is incorrect and needs to be looked at again. And numbers, things like that, just anything that's really been evaluated, I think that there's a looking at that again and a correction along these lines. Now, when we are dealing with groups and communications and things like this, those connections of like-minded individuals and things like this, in Scorpio, aligned with the institutional kind of backing of Jupiter and Saturn, yes, there can definitely be some backroom dealing here as well. Notice that we just had some of that pointed out to us recently. This could be more along those lines. So secret financial communications and planning. I don't think that this is going to come out immediately, but it could later that this was going on around this period of time. There's also with Mercury and Venus this sense of creation of meaning. So cultural myths, also cult myths potentially. So utilization of pop culture, even potentially female figures to make some broader point. We may even eventually hear about stories around this time, especially around those themes, being untrue. Or Mercury could also be presenting or representing a journalist that has access to some kind of cultural myth making right now that winds up coming out later as well. That Mercury in Scorpio retrograde is someone who has access to information that we're not usually privy to. So this is quite fascinating. I don't think we're going to see it right away, but there's so many alignments that are coming up at the end of 2025 and then into 2026 that look like information getting shaken loose that we will hear about this, but it may just be a bit down the line when a story is actually published. Additionally, like I said, connecting with like-minded individuals, this could be movements that are kicking off that have staying power, especially regarding governance or just how the world is going with Jupiter, Saturn. There are all different ways of governing society. This is speaking to the crux of that. Is that going well? Is it not? People are going to have opinions about that. People do have opinions about that. And I think there's going to be some movements kicking up around what's working, what's not, especially on an institutional or governance kind of a level. Another thing I could definitely see with this is top-down messaging. That can absolutely wind up playing into those kinds of cultural or even pop cultural myths and things that are getting brought up here, that messaging aspect of this. And I think that that's going to trigger some conversations as well about civility. That won't necessarily be on the Mercury-Venus side of this, but civility is something that's going to be really important to Jupiter in the mix here. And then Saturn in Pisces is going to look at things that are very seedy or untoward as a bit grotesque. So there may be some pretty grotesque words that are coming out throughout this period of time as well. I would actually say that Mercury, Mars coming through that area could wind up triggering that off too. So something about grotesque words could come through at the end of October or at the end of November as well. Now, there could also be, when it comes to that top-down messaging, could be an obfuscation aspect of that as well in terms of ordaining an obfuscation. So allowance for something to not come out, that being institutionally supported here. You know, I'm not sure that I think that that's going to wind up lasting for too terribly long. One thing that's going to take place toward the end of this is that Uranus is going to wind up moving back into Taurus. That's going to be right here. And so there's going to be right at the end of this broader period of time an opposition between Uranus and Mercury. And that is one of those kicks of information where something winds up slipping out. Another thing here when we're dealing with Mercury, Venus, Jupiter and then Saturn specifically in Pisces, we could see more trade controls as well starting to be enforced, an allowance of that somehow. But on a personal level, this does really deepen connections with people. So groups, connections, creative projects, those coming together again based on like-mindedness, like-heartedness, similar goals. There being this kind of hidden depth to connections, really being able to connect with people, being able to see eye to eye, feeling that we are able to be seen, that we're able to be vulnerable with these alignments in Scorpio and Jupiter and Cancer there. There is a protective kind of an energy here to our connections and our understanding of each other. There may even be one of those interesting things that goes on with pop culture. This could be one of those things that's coming through where people are saying something, but they're not saying it directly, but everyone knows what everyone else is saying about a given topic. So we may see a major aspect of that also coming through. This tends to be a social media kind of thing where people really beat around the bush with a topic because they want some plausible deniability, basically. And then, yeah, there's just really high sensitivity mentally, emotionally, in our connections, in our sense of belonging, a lot of creativity here, a lot of appreciation of art and creativity, as well as really, really, really wonderfully strong intuition. People may really be discovering a sense of intuition around this period of time as well. A sense of spiritual connection, that connectivity aspect of Mercury and Venus in the mix here could very well be spiritual in nature as well. And the development of this kind of work, the creativity, the intuition, the imagination and everything, that I would say during this period of time would be wonderful to lean into. Now, finally, last but certainly not least, we have this whole area getting cleaned up by Mercury Direct. I do also want to point out, now that we're just talking about Mercury, that Mercury retrograde, personally, and I will knock on wood here, I love it. I think that it's going to be fascinating. Full disclosure, it is stationing retrograde exactly square to my Mercury. So it's going to destroy my ability to communicate. But I think that in terms of the fact that it is aligning with this trine of Jupiter and Saturn, this is so cool because we're getting so many messages, so much energy coming through this area that is really profound. And yet, because of the fact that it's a lot to process, and already in this world, we have a lot to think about and worry about, and sometimes fear, Scorpio energy is going to pull that up a bit. But we have the opportunity to look at what's going on for us emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically with the Scorpio energy and how that is helping or hindering us throughout this period of time. Looking at that from many, many, many different angles. What is it that we want to connect to? It's very possible that what has happened is that Mars has driven up some frustration, some anger, some hatred, some of those rougher edged feelings in its ability also to motivate us and kick things off and so forth, and send us into a path where Mercury winds up pulling it back and pulls it back to Venus, and then points out, wouldn't this be a nicer alignment to feel, to experience, if we were able to process and release the edges of that Mars energy? Wouldn't it be nice if that assertion of energy, that determination of energy, were more of a quiet insistence? If it were more along the lines of, this is something I love and it's something I'm going to do, and just quietly assert, again, with the sun coming through, perhaps a sense of self-sovereignty, not allowing, specifically when it comes to the news cycle, that to hit us in really rough ways, or at the very least, recognize when it does. Take that step back, try to reclaim your energy, try to assert some sovereignty over what it is that's going on inside of you. Connecting more to a spiritual kind of an energy, connecting to creative things, connecting to music, to movies, to art, to these things that make life worth living, to remind ourselves that that is a huge aspect of our lives, that there's a lot of distraction that is not healthy for us and for culture and for society, that are pulling us away from those joys, you know? So as Mercury is reevaluating, looking at this from so many different angles, yes, it's going to feel like a lot, again, emotionally, mentally, in Scorpio, but the amount of clarity that's available to us through this period of time, we should, if we're able to flow with this energy, again, stay in our own lane, check out when we need to, take care of your energy, emotional, mental, spiritual well-being, checking in on that, I would say at least daily, adjusting along those lines. So what's actually going to be functional, what's actually going to be effective for you, what's helping, what's hindering. Then by the end of this, I think that we're really, really, really clear about how it is that we're able to move into the much more active energies of next year that we're going to be stepping into. I'm going to keep reminding us of this. This is a bit quieter of a period of time that we're dealing with right now than what we're dealing with next year. And we'll talk about that shortly, but making sure that we are good internally is going to be absolutely paramount. That's going to be the core as to whether we are able to manage our energies in the coming couple of years. So taking care of ourselves and being able to recognize when something is just too much for us, and that's fine. Tuning out in those moments. So again, with Mercury coming through direct, this is definitely matters of accountability. At this point, we have both Mercury and Saturn direct. Remember that I mentioned Mercury's going direct on the 29th of November. Saturn is going direct around the 28th, 29th of November. So there's something there around finally moving forward when it comes to matters of making sense of these issues, of insight into these issues, into what is functional, what's practical, what's reasonable, and how we're able to move forward from that point. So again, super full of opportunities for accountability in this broader period of time. We could also see some plans come to light. This is a really planning energy to have both Mercury and Saturn direct now. We know how we're stepping forward, so greater insight into how to move forward. And the wavering of a lot of us, I think, over the past weeks prior to this point, which again is going to be about the 29th of November through the 9th of December. It is that wavering which has provided greater insight on how to move forward and has offered a sense of clarity of mind and purpose. Some of us may be pulled into an emotional sense of rock bottom, of beyond mental exhaustion, if we don't tune out to where we are forced to focus on what actually matters, what's actually a priority, what's actually practical, because it won't really be possible to focus on every little detail throughout this period of time. And those of us that try to, I think, are really going to be feeling on the other side of it, like we've kind of been brought through the ringer, and then a clarity around the fact that we can't put ourselves in that ringer and function. So much greater clarity of mind and purpose. The alignment to Jupiter as well should give us a sense of good expectations, good news, planning for things to go well, how we can take positive, helpful action for ourselves, a sense of affirmation of our ideas, an affirmation of our expression, an affirmation of our purpose. There may very well be some free speech matters coming up with this, for sure. In addition to words and communications that really cut to the heart of a matter. I like that Mercury is cleaning up on its own here, because this isn't about, do we, fill it with knives and anger with Mars, or do we fill it with, roses and, peace and coming together and stuff with Venus? This is just Mercury. It's just cutting to the heart of it. Mercury and Scorpio. I would also definitely expect communiques, directives, communications, words that are coming from institutions here with the alignment with Jupiter and Saturn too. And those may also strike us a bit weird, but keep in mind, look at that Mercury. It's at 24 degrees or so. It will be crossing to an opposition with Uranus right around 28, 29 degrees after it is clearing this point. So right in the beginning of December, it's going to be opposing Uranus. And if there's something funky going on there, Uranus is going to throw some sand basically into the gears with that. So it'll do that if necessary. So yeah, finally, to sum up, this is an extremely potent period of time. There is an opportunity to do nothing with this. It is a grand trine. That's the main risk of it, is to not utilize it on a personal level. This whole period of time, it's going to be wonderful to check in on how are things hitting you emotionally. If you feel not great, one thing that Scorpio can really help with is follow that thread back to the root of that. Figure out where that came from. And then you know. And then you can spend a little bit less time with whatever that is creating a sense of negativity or unease, fear, discomfort, a sense of too much risk or something like this. Especially for creative types. One, this is likely to be pretty inspiring and hopefully motivating, but utilizing it in particular around that end of November timeframe when Venus is in the mix as well, I think is going to be really stunning. The ability to refine and refine and refine your imagined outcome of whatever it is that you are applying creativity to is going to be super fruitful throughout this time. And yeah, aside from that, really looking at which houses this is aligning in your chart for. So this is what we call a triad. Notice how in this case, for Aries rising, for instance, this is 4th, 8th, and 12th house. If we had Leo rising, this would also be in 4th, 8th, and 12th house. So this is what we call a triad, and it will align for different signs with the same kinds of houses, but I have still done this just sign by sign because it does matter where Jupiter is in the houses. It matters where these are somewhat different energies. So I would definitely recommend checking that out and focusing on the areas of life that are getting highlighted here. For all of this, this is going to wind up speaking to some matter of personal self-expression and growth. That would be for the water signs rising, some matter of resources, success, work, tasks, things like that for the air signs rising. For the earth signs rising, this will be a highly social kind of an energy, a matter of your connections with other people, your relationships, your communications. And then, yeah, like I said, for the fire signs rising, this is going to align with these more private, personal, emotional, spiritual houses. So these are pretty specific areas in our life where we can wind up focusing in on. And I would reiterate to try to utilize this to that end, because this is a very rare kind of an alignment that we're going to be working with here, and it's really wonderful. But with all of that said, I do just want to thank you all so much for spending this time with me. I do really appreciate it. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, that helps to spread the video around. I really appreciate that as well. And do consider sticking around by subscribing for future videos where we look at these kinds of alignments, take these through the houses. And thank you so much to the members of the channel for your support. So thank you so much to Angel Niblock, Michelle Howell, JJ, Deborah Keel-Leavitt, Patrick McKenney, Jody, Anne Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Maria Serral Hyro, Rachel Windholtz, Aya, the Z-Man 1291, Lynn Newman, Long T Standing, the Nelson Cat Maya, Honey D. Martino, Dolly Geezy, Mango JT, B. Love, Grace, Psyche Lloyd, Noah, Aquarian Antiquarian, Susan Martin, On the Road, Jonathan Mason, Chad Wiseman, Ezekiel David LaRosa, Adrienne K, Astrology Party, SP, Karen, Teresa Jones, Seda Topkuoglu, Sherry Leas, Horse Dog Notebook, Justice League Pie, and Nioke Beam. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you are interested in memberships, there is information in the description box below. And yeah, other than all of that, let's go ahead and dive into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, we have the grand water trines between your fourth, eighth, and 12th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally about your emotions, about deeper connections that you develop with people, about matters of trust, understanding, that which is within and outside of our control. So the trine that's underpinning this, Jupiter in Cancer in your fourth house and Saturn in Pisces in your 12th house, can definitely be speaking to developing internal strength, internal trust, a sense of feeling very grounded, sense of working through emotions, potentially even family issues from the past, even family issues from the present. And you may well be finding that you're wanting to do a lot of processing, working through things, a lot of focusing in private space. These are very private houses, all three of them, but especially the fourth and the 12th houses. This is about what you're able to get done on your own and what you are fundamentally feeling very comfortable with. And there may be underlying messages here as well about, again, controlling what you're able to, but releasing what you can't control, trying not to fear what's outside of your control. So then the way that this is getting wrapped into this grand trine, which is reaching up into your eighth house, this is speaking to matters of personal, psychological, emotional development and transformation, as well as matters of trust, shared resources, intimacy, things like this. And the way that this is going to wind up getting triggered through is Mars will come through. It'll come through with Mercury, and that'll be throughout October. And then as we get into November, we're going to see the Sun and Venus come through here. And what I like about this is it is likely that as Mars is going through that eighth house, it's going to point out some kind of complication or some kind of issue there. It's likely to be tied into deeply felt, deeply held emotions, or things that maybe we try to sweep aside, things we try to overlook, possibly in your case, in other people and in what they're bringing to, any given scenario around that October period of time, as well as driving up a lot of desire to connect, to be able to trust, to be able to rely upon other people. And then as this grand trine continues to develop with the Sun and Venus and then the Mercury retrograde going through this place, there's going to be layers and layers unfolding about where some trust issues may have come up. So past baggage, releasing that spiritual, emotional, psychological healing from previous deeply held onto connections that you've developed with people. Maybe they've gone well, maybe they haven't in any sort of ways, but this is really pointing out those matters of trust, pointing out those matters of where is it that you feel like you're able to rely upon other people. And that doesn't even have to be a matter of a problem that has come up with other people in the past. It can also just speak to if you were raised to be really self-reliant and to, quote, not be a burden to others. That can also wind up contributing to a feeling of, well, I shouldn't rely upon others. I should really rely upon myself. And so then looking at where that's coming from, looking at the root of that, trying to address the root of that with the safety of Jupiter being in Cancer in your fourth house, really trying to nurture you and make you feel a lot more comfortable. So there's a lot of support there for developing that sense of openness to depend upon other people, openness to allow for people to rely on you as well, depending on how this has played out for you in the past. So hopefully this is deepening some family relationships as well. And if there have been issues there in the past, this wouldn't necessarily at all be saying, oh, well, we need to cut off toxic relationships and so on and so forth. This would more so be encouraging a sense of holistic understanding of different situations. So if there has been something that's been really untrustworthy, to nurture yourself around that, to accept how that's made you feel, to take some time to process that emotionally, to try and get those emotions unstuck. But maybe if there have been complications that your family as a whole have experienced together, this can be really healing to processing that together as well. and then looking at that in a different light. So this kind of creative approach to trust and shared resources. This isn't saying that this all needs to be sorted out super quick or immediately or anything like that. But are there ways that you can work and kind of develop those trust muscles? And this could even be a spiritual thing around working up your trust of spiritual forces to have your back, support you. Again, not feeling like you just need to rely on yourself all the time. Being able to depend on your instincts, on the messages that you're receiving, on things just kind of working out for you. So also, with the emotional work that's going on here, there's likely to be a lot about expectations. So how do you expect for things to go by default? Do you plan for the worst? I know that seems logical at times, but it does put us in a specific kind of an emotional state. And believe me, I definitely understand that. But working through that here and there, working through those expectations, trying to get yourself to a point where you're able to rely more and more on a sense of faith that things are going to work out as long as you are taking care of your part of that. And I mean, speaking of specifically your part of that, this may even, if you were the type of person, this is going to kind of vary based on the emotional lessons that you have received and internalized throughout life. But again, if you feel like you constantly need to be there for other people, you need to be a specific thing for other people, you need to take responsibility for other people in a lot of ways. This is also going to be pointing that out. It probably as a sense of frustration initially as Mars is coming through this area, but a really healing kind of a frustration of, look, I need to be able to relax once I've kind of taken care of my part of things and then be able to trust that others are going to hold up their end of any given deal. And that is really, really powerful to be able to tap into that. It does speak to a real personal, emotional, psychological, spiritual kind of a transformation that will wind up then reverberating throughout different aspects of your life. The energy of your home, the willingness of you to create a space that you can be really comfortable and calm and cool and collected and create those boundaries around, where you're able to create something of a sanctuary for yourself with the Jupiter in your fourth house, but then also with Saturn in the 12th house, pointing out the limitations of what we can't control, what is outside of us, what we do kind of need to roll with. And again, winds up then calling on a lot of spiritual trust. I mean, the impact that kind of work has is really huge. So this is definitely no small thing for you. So I would try your best not to be impatient with yourself as you're working through these things. But again, what a really wonderful foundation then to work from. And it would make sense that would be the case with Jupiter transiting through your fourth house right now. Yeah, ultimately, this is around realignment of boundaries, of beliefs, of expectations, of standards of behavior for yourself. And again, I would imagine that part of this is going to be not taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. If you're anything like me, sometimes you do that and then you get frustrated with yourself about doing that, Then also the expectations of yourself and the expectations of other people to also respect your boundaries, respect your beliefs, respect your time, your energy, your space. And hopefully through this process then, with that Mercury retrograde, with Venus coming through here, which is a benefic, with Jupiter helping out, which is also a benefic, the sun coming through here and bringing a lot of light to this area. Hopefully this can wind up then feeding into the ability to really rely on your own sense of values and the ability to recognize in your life the people who have supported you throughout this period of time and who have reinforced your sense of values and your boundaries. But yeah, other than that, I would just say a couple really literal kinds of things that could come through with this. This should be helpful for inheritances. This should be helpful for matters of shared resources, contracts you have with other people, agreements you have with other people, with property matters. So Jupiter in your fourth house, that can literally be your home. The eighth house being, again, agreements or contracts, taxes, things like that can come through. And then Saturn in the 12th, this may be something you've been processing for years as Saturn's been in that place kind of on its own since March of 2023, but just working on matters of what's inside your control and what's not, and then worrying a little less, putting a bit less energy into those things that are outside of your control, working on matters of expectations, developing a sense of inner authority that doesn't need to feel so difficult, like you're pushing so hard. So yeah, a lot of release here, but it should feel really much better emotionally by, the other side of this, and a lot clearer. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aries, with this grand trine. So I hope that it treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Taurus, we have the water grand trine taking place from your 3rd to 7th to 11th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally social. There may be a major emotional component to the social for you. That's kind of natural because you have the water signs in these places, but it's definitely getting really highlighted by all of these transits. So you may feel like you are quite socially busy throughout this period of time, dealing with a lot of communications, a lot of moving pieces, trying to manage relationships, connections, things like this. There may be something even that you're planning around this time, or like a group or organization, coworkers, family, anyone that you might be needing to like manage and figure out people and social situations throughout this time. And this is getting really meaningfully highlighted. So it's likely that there's something really important going on. Even if it seems kind of run of the mill, you may be really making a strong impression on people. You may be developing some new relationships that are actually going to be a lot more helpful to you in the long run than it might seem on the face of it. So I would definitely try and put in some really good work into this, but also just bring a sense of compassion, community, connection to whatever you're doing in the kind of social sphere. You may even have a really strong desire. If you, for instance, a lot of people have been kind of less connected since the whole COVID stuff, but if you have been, again, kind of less social recently, as Mars is coming through that 7th house of yours in October, you may find yourself really desiring to connect with people more, wanting to have new connections with people, wanting to feel that kind of emotional satisfaction of connecting with people, having like-minded people around, contributing to some kind of social goal together. And if that's the case, but you're not quite sure exactly how to do that with Mars coming through, in November, that's when we start to get the sun coming through that area, making this grand trine, and then Venus comes through. We get that big Mercury retrograde that's going to take place in this area. So try not to worry if in the beginning of this, it's not quite clear as to how those pieces are going to all wind up fitting together. That should really wind up developing and unfolding layer by layer throughout this whole broader period of time. Also, I will say, because we have so many different placements running through your 7th house, try not to assume that first big push is going to be the only big push if you do wind up really socially busy. There's going to be a lot of energy moving through that area really over the course of the season, running straight into December. So with these specific alignments like Saturn in your 11th, Jupiter in your 3rd, I really wouldn't be surprised if you have a tendency to overcommit. So that may also be something to kind of keep in mind, is that simplifying these things and trying to bring things together, trying not to overstretch yourself, trying not to overschedule, overbook, things like this. That would probably be quite wise. But yeah, so ultimately, really a lot of meaning to these community connections that you have. The stronger part of this grand trine, that's running between Jupiter in your 3rd and Saturn in your. The 3rd house has to do with your community around you, generally speaking, so your neighborhood, your locality. This can also have to do with education, so any sort of schools or, library, places like that tend to come into play when it comes to the 3rd house. There's also a lot of communication and social media kinds of aspects also come into play with the third house. And then the 11th is specifically speaking to social groups, and then friendships, allies, benefactors, people who you're able to have mutually beneficial connections with that aren't necessarily, romantic partners, aren't necessarily family. Sometimes coworkers even wind up showing up here, especially people who are in positions of authority, particularly with Saturn being the representative here. But so that's what's really getting highlighted, is that kind of planning, communicating, connecting along the lines of group dynamics and plans that you have that are mutual plans with those around you. And then the people keep coming through and connecting to this in the 7th house. So if you're planning something, if you're organizing something, if you have a role within your community either now or that you're wanting to develop, you may be surprised by how many people are connecting around that or connecting with that group dynamic, that group goal. This should also be really helpful if you're trying to market. And again, if you are, that compassion, that warm kind of tone that you can provide to that should also be really helpful. And like I said, you may have some people coming in that wind up being longer term friends or more significant friends than you would expect, just, on the face of it. Jupiter is also helping specifically with your ability to communicate clearly, with your ability to communicate your genuine needs and desires in Cancer there. So what are you wanting to bring to the equation of those kinds of group dynamics, partnerships, things like this? Being able to communicate that really clearly shows up with Jupiter supporting you in that way. And then all of the inner planets going through your 7th house is certainly providing people to connect to and kind of practice that with. And you may find that your words actually have a much more profound impact on people throughout this time than usual as well. Yeah, like I said, this is also really bringing out the emotional dynamic of your social connections. Yes, that's kind of natural for you to do because of your Taurus rising, the way that your houses are lined up, but it's really highlighting that, and it's bringing a sense of, this is why that's so important. This is why that's so significant. So that insight that you're getting into the emotional components of your social connections and what that ultimately means to you, why that's genuinely important to you, and how you're able to manage that with other people. I know some people can be a little bit flippant with social connections, things like that. But having opportunities to connect with people emotionally, perhaps even spiritually, throughout this period of time, it's going to point to something that you can really develop, that you can run with, that you can come into your own with. So being able to listen, express feelings really clearly. Like I said, there's this interesting kind of authority that's going on here, I think, with your voice and the meaning, the participation, looking at that Saturn in the 11th house. There's this aspect of the 11th house of shared goals. Like, what are you working with other people toward? What do you all agree is important? So you being able to advocate for that really well and state the case for that really clearly, get people on the same page. Like I was saying, like managing the people in a way where they feel heard and they feel like they understand what the point is of whatever this kind of social dynamic is that you're working here. And yeah, ultimately, this is just really supportive for those goals that you have that are tied to sense of ideals. So those group dynamics, what are you working toward together? That's really supported here. If you have some specific goals and you've kind of thought about, what if I were to connect with like-minded people, if that's kind of been a thought, this would be really great to connect with people around things that you mutually care about, basically. Because like I said, it's likely to be more profound than usual. And then collaborating toward those ends. So mutually supporting each other, being able to connect each other maybe with others who are able to help with certain aspects. So a lot of what I'm thinking about with this is like organizing family or neighbors or a community to some specific ends. And that could be a cause, or it could be like organizing an event or something like this. But this could definitely also speak to working dynamic. So coworkers and teams and all getting on the same page and being able to bring a sense of authority to those situations, which should genuinely be super beneficial to you. And maybe not even just in the short term, but it's teaching you something about yourself and what you are bringing to the table when it comes to other people, basically. But yeah, I'm just trying to think what else could possibly wind up coming through with this. I will say if things get a little heavy or intense and heated with someone early on, like in October, if emotions are really running high and maybe it doesn't go as smoothly as you would love to have a grand trine go as Mars is going through that area, I wouldn't sweat it. You have a lot of really helpful energy coming through there. And ultimately, this is going to wind up clarifying something that's very significant to you, very important to you, and especially to that connection. That could definitely be taking place in like a romantic partnership or with a close friend. So yeah, if there's a lot of getting worked up in the beginning of this, that's just because it's Mars first, but we get some really wonderful energies to wind up coming through. And then because that's been drawn up, it's helpful because then these guys are able to come through, clear it up, and then you just have a much better understanding of the social dynamics around you. But yeah, I think that that's pretty much what I have for you, Taurus. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have the water grand trine taking place between your second, sixth, and 10th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally about material security, success, your working life, your routine. So a lot of this is going to straightforwardly be related to work, but if you're not working, this is going to be around your material life. So matters of what you're working with and where you're trying to get. So this should have you feeling very guided when it comes to your career. Things should feel like they're aligning pretty well for you to be able to just kind of focus on this area of your life without too many distractions or disruptions. There's a lot of energy that's focused here. So when it comes to matters of family distractions, disruptions, confusion, things like that, that shouldn't be so bad throughout this period of time. It should be a period of time where you're able to really focus on your work and your earning, your reputation within your field, things like this. Now, what's helpful here too is you have Saturn in the 10th, which can be really helpful in terms of giving you a sense of authority when it comes to your working life, your reputation, what you're bringing to the table really being seen, valued, understood, etc. Saturn can feel like a lot of responsibility, but it does tend to do well in the 10th house, given that this is an area where we do tend to focus a lot of our sense of responsibility. And then Jupiter coming through the second house is highlighting your resources. So not just earnings and money and things like this that you receive in terms of income, but also your skills, your talents, your proclivities, the attitude that you bring to your work. Those are all resources that you're also able to utilize toward the ends of that reputation, toward the ends of this is how I view success. This is what I really value in life. And this is how I'm going to use what I have to get myself to where I'm trying to go. What's cool is that you have that big picture there of what you're bringing to the table and what you're trying to achieve with that. But then you have all these inner planets, first Mars, Mercury, and then the Sun. Mercury will go retrograde in this area. Venus will wind up coming through, and then Mercury winds up going direct. This should work up your motivation quite a bit. So that's really helpful to all of that because you do need that missing piece of, okay, and here's the get up and go each day to be able to wind up contributing to your resources and reputation. Now, there may be a little bit of an edge to this motivation in the beginning as Mars is coming through initially, and it may even highlight some areas of frustration that you've kind of swept aside because it hasn't seemed like that big of a deal. Mars is going to make a little bit more of a big deal out of anything that's in terms of your routine frustrating you, or in terms of your working life, coworkers, things like that, that are frustrating you. that may feel like they're kind of getting in the way of you accomplishing what it is that you're trying to do. But it's not just coming through to do that. It's pointing something out. And then the Sun, Venus, Mercury wind up doing more work in this area and cleaning that up. So there's a lot of opportunity to address any of the little frustrations, the little bugaboos and things like that that wind up coming up around the edges of a really strong drive and motivation to get things done. So for instance, if you have something of a flexible routine, you may be trying to either create some boundaries around that, draw some lines, eliminate some distractions, possibly even eliminate some of the work that you're doing that is less productive or less helpful, so that you're able to really focus in on what's working for you. It's likely that you're just going to be super motivated to get ahead, much more so than usual throughout like October, November period of time, with a little bit more edge to it in October. But even with Mars there, this should be helpful in the sense of feeling supported, feeling like the effort that you're putting in, the energy, the skills, the clarity, the attitude that you're bringing to the table is really helpful in terms of creating a sense of abundance. And I don't just mean that in the sense of finance, but also, okay, I have this plan. I've sorted out how I'm going to take care of all of the different steps of this, being able to make progress along those lines, and then seeing the rewards of that. Having that fuel recognition, having that fuel income, having that then fuel a sense of things are going smoothly, things are going well. I knew I could do this if I just addressed those little things that Mars is pointing out in the beginning of this grand trine here. So things are really clicking. And that should then feed into a sense of a lot more satisfaction with your daily routines. Now, with all of these planets coming through your sixth house, one after another, there may also be health aspects that wind up coming in here. So again, when it comes to things like distractions, things that give you a sense of being kind of thrown off, you know, those energies that kind of creep into your day and then your energy is kind of just off for the rest of the day, or you feel like you need to push yourself that much more. Maybe there are certain things where, you know, if you eat a certain thing or you start your day in a certain way, whatever it is, sleep routines, things like this, it's much more likely that you're going to see, which is kind of frustrating. That's probably going to be part of the Mars part of this in October, where you see how those are getting in the way or kind of messing with you. And so getting really clear about, okay, I need to clean these things up, and that's going to help me so much more with, again, getting things done and seeing the results of your work without having to push and push and push past those frustrations, those distractions, those things that kind of just throw you off. So there's likely to be some kind of a health aspect to this. It can be psychological, emotional health stuff that winds up playing into this as well. So do you feel like things go well when you bring energy into them? If you don't, that may be something really important to address throughout this period of time as well. Do you feel instinctively like, well, I could really pour my energy into this, but what's the point? This would speak really directly to that kind of a difficulty or a challenge, and would be really, really helpful to that end. So if you do sometimes get that response or that reaction to either enthusiasm or ambition, things like this, I would really recommend not sweeping that aside throughout this period of time, because it's likely to be really, really, really productive to look at that, to address that, to feel your way through that, and to process that throughout this period of time, to reprogram that, basically, especially with that Mercury retrograde coming through this area. Also, when it comes to your working life, again, there's this kind of emotional dynamic to that. It's a bit of a natural thing. This is always where your houses are. You always have, you know, Cancer in the second, and Scorpio in the sixth, and so on. But this is getting really highlighted around this period of time. So again, the attitude, the emotion that you bring to what you do, you feel good about it, you enjoy it. Looking at the emotional dynamics of your goals and how your routine helps you to accomplish those things, your emotional connection with finances and earnings and security and stability and things like this. That's also going to help to really enhance a lot of the benefits that you can get out of this period of time. And like I said, if there's some kind of a breakthrough around these issues throughout this time, yeah, that's a lot more profound. That's something that you can run with for the rest of your life, basically. So bringing that sense of emotional intelligence to your working life, that emotional, like self-awareness and things like this. And then also bringing that dedication and expecting to be met halfway. And then finally, beyond the immediate, there's also likely to be a lot of drive here. Again, with those inner planets coming through the sixth house, there's a lot of planning that goes on in the sixth house, a lot of thinking things through and then following some steps. So when it comes to your career, your sense of purpose, your sense of direction, what you're trying to accomplish for yourself, the role, the position that you're trying to carve out for yourself, it's very likely that you're going to, again, feel more motivated. This is going to come up naturally. You won't really have to push for this. You can definitely if you want to utilize these energies, but it's going to be those little instincts and urges to plan things out, to try to decide, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? How might I be able to get myself there with less wavering or less frustration? So I'd really engage with those energies as they wind up coming up, because again, you're just kind of more connected to those energies of yourself throughout this period of time. So your answers are likely to be a lot more true about where it is that you really want to get and how to get there, but also your ability to focus on figuring out all of those steps and feeling hopeful about them, especially in that November timeframe when you're dealing with the Sun and Venus and Mercury coming through this area. Also, don't be frustrated if you start to plan something in a certain way and then you decide, this aspect of it, I don't think that's actually that important to me. That Mercury retrograde will have you looking at this from many different angles and clarifying throughout the season. But yeah, other than that, I would just say, again, the energy that you're bringing to your working life, if you have a kind of traditional career, likely to be paying off, especially when it comes to your attitude and like the emotional intelligence that you're bringing to the table throughout this time. There may be a lot of social connections or conversations, connecting with people that you're working with towards certain goals. If you work with clients, this could have you being really, really, really busy because you've got all those inner planets running through. And if you do that, you may feel like that kind of work, you may well feel like you are getting pulled in a lot of different directions just because there's a lot of different planets there. But the more that you can organize that throughout this period of time, the better set up you're going to be to organize moments like that where you do get a bit more inundated or pulled in different directions in the future. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Cancer, we have the Water Grand Trine running from your first to fifth to ninth house. So this is really wonderful. This is all about personal development, what it is that you love, growth and personal expansion. This is a really wonderfully spirited energy that you're working with here. So with Jupiter in your first house and Saturn in your ninth, it's likely that you've been spending a lot of time focusing on personal improvement. So developing yourself, developing your understanding of your role in the world, your purpose, your sense of spirituality, who you are and who you are trying to stretch and expand and grow into in this life. So a lot of really big questions around that are super functional and wonderful, given the fact that you have this trine taking place between these two. You may even wind up, taking courses or traveling or just trying to expand your horizon so that there's more that you understand that you resonate with, right? So this feels right to me. Maybe this direction doesn't interest me as much. Sorting that out, figuring it out throughout this time. Probably taking that really quite seriously. You also may just be finding that you're having some really wonderful luck or connecting well with people with Jupiter transiting through your first house as well. But now we're getting your fifth house highlighted. And this is bringing in a lot of dynamics of interests, passions, joys, If you have children, your children typically wind up showing up in this house. It's very spirited, very inspired, and it's all about your spirit and how you express that in your life. So creativity of all forms also winds up showing up in this place. So I absolutely love this alignment for you. This is probably my favorite triad of houses to be dealing with. So this is very much pointing to, hey, you know, all of those things of like you're trying to grow, you're trying to develop, you're trying to expand yourself. Here are all of these things that should be really wonderful and motivating and inspiring you and kind of lighting a fire under you. All these wonderful aspects of life, these fascinating subjects and topics that you can really sink your teeth into. They're going to be introducing themselves to you one after another throughout this period of time, as well as opportunities to express how you've developed, how you've grown throughout the past several months and even couple of years, with Saturn having gone through your 9th house since March of 2023. And this may well be spiritual in nature. So trying to understand your own spiritual rhythms, your place within the cosmos, basically, how you're able to connect spiritually, developing that, as well as developing a sense of emotional trust with yourself to be able to express yourself. So if you're a creative type, but you've been kind of shy about it, for one thing, that wouldn't be shocking considering you have Scorpio in your 5th house, but there's also a lot of depth there. And that probably is something that you should work on being less inhibited at the very least about, not worrying about whether it will be received in a bad way, and rather than relying on trust that if this is something that I want to share, it will be received well, it will be understood, and it will contribute something significant to that topic or that field, that medium. If you do have children, it's also very likely that your personal growth, you trying to develop and align yourself more and more with your sense of purpose, your sense of who you are, is connecting really well with your children throughout this time too. Now, in October, we're going to have Mars coming through here first. It's not remotely a bad alignment, but it does have a little bit more of an edge to it than the other transits we're going to be getting in November. So if you do have children, and at first when you are introducing them to, you know, some of these concepts, or they are interacting with some of how you are trying to develop as a person, you may run into some of those initial reactions that parents can get from kids of, but you're not supposed to be a person, you're supposed to be my parent, kind of a thing, you know? But then I would expect that they'll actually open up a lot to this as we get Venus and the Sun and Mercury coming through this area throughout November and then even into the beginning of December. So I wouldn't give up on it if you get an initial kind of weird reaction in October. And that also goes creatively. If you are playing with a new medium or something, some of these fascinating, inspiring projects or things like this that you're starting to dive into around this period of time, I wouldn't expect you to just be great at it immediately. And if you do have a kind of emotional response to something like that in October, I would just stay as open as you possibly can about that. Keep working with it, keep developing it. Now, you also may be connecting with people that feel very aligned, that have very similar interests, that you feel like you're able to connect with on an emotional and possibly even a spiritual level when it comes to your values, your belief system, your worldview, things like this, that you feel are kind of encouraging and supporting and urging you forward when it comes to what inspires you. And this can help a lot also with breakthroughs in self-expression. Like I said, if you are at all inhibited or a bit shy about things like that, you may be connecting with people who encourage you to connect, that encourage you to express yourself openly, that genuinely appreciate and enjoy your creativity, your unique expression, and are therefore giving you a sense of feeling comfortable, being vulnerable enough to show that side of yourself more and more. But yeah, ultimately, this is about a sense of personal emotional healing, accepting who you are fundamentally, who you are now, who you're wanting to be, the fact that you're going to get there, the fact that in this moment, hopefully you already are there. Then if you're wanting to, develop into something else down the line, that you're on the right path for that, that you're really capable of that. And doing so through a sense of being able to express yourself creatively, being able to express yourself joyfully and not worrying about if someone's going to take it wrong or anything like that. Being able even to express your moods, your emotions. And this may feel very childlike in you, or again, you have children, it's very likely they're going to be playing a really important role in this as well. And this is ultimately helping to align your sense of dreams, your beliefs with that personal power of self-expression, self-acceptance, self-love. So yeah, again, this is really about your sense of spirit and feeling like you're able to just really open that up and enjoy that and love that, value it, prioritize it, feel safe with it, get to know that a lot better. So yeah, anything that sparks an interest in you throughout this period of time, I'd run with it as long as you're interested in it. If it starts to get a little bit boring or feels like it's not aligned, feel free to drop it. But anything that winds up coming through, it's feeding into that Saturn in the ninth and Jupiter in your first. And it's going to help you a lot to understand yourself a lot better and what makes you tick and what you truly enjoy in life. So yeah, that's why I absolutely love this alignment for you, Cancer. I think that's pretty much what I have for you. So I hope it treats you absolutely wonderfully. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Leo, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally personal, private, emotional, spiritual work that's being done throughout this period of time. And I get the feeling that there's something going on here about voicing boundaries or making clear what's really yours to handle and what isn't. I'm really getting drawn to the fact that Saturn is up there in the 8th, and that Saturn in the 8th is getting supported by these other placements. So Saturn in the 8th can speak to where you're connected to other people. So this can speak to commitments and kind of higher level connections like that. There can be resources involved, like actual material resources, emotional resources, the challenges and difficulties of other people that you're connected to, what it is that other people are bringing to the table when it comes to your connections. And with Saturn and Pisces there's definitely something about what's really yours, what's someone else's. So where do you end and others begin, and vice versa? What's really yours to manage, what's yours to hold on to? I feel like with Jupiter here that this is going to be speaking to gaining a sense of greater internal trust of yourself, or help working things out internally in your subconscious. That's what tends to come through with the 12th house, is things that are outside of our conscious awareness. So our own subconscious, our patterns. There's also a lot of spiritual connections in this place, and your kind of emotional, internal support systems, guidance systems, your intuition, your instincts. That should be helping you quite a bit throughout this time. And then with the inner planets coming through your 4th house and aligning with all of this, there's something about trusting yourself when it comes to, again, what's yours, what's other people's, what's your responsibility, and voicing that, making that clear. There might be a lot that's going on in your family or in your home around this period of time, and that may be why you're needing to draw some lines. This doesn't necessarily have to be the kind of extreme, like cutting people out of your life or anything like that. It may be, but this could also just speak to a period of time in which there's a lot going on internally for you. And so also being responsible for handling that for other people throughout this time might be quite a lot. Now, there may also be something here about working with ancestors or ancestral patterns or lines or spiritual support from ancestors, from your roots, from your family, that you're connecting with spiritually on some level. So some spiritual assistance with family concerns or with home concerns, private concerns, or just feeling, again, more connected to ancestry, things like this. You may also really feel like it's safe to work through those kinds of patterns and stuff that we inherit that is very abstract, that's kind of etheric, that we wind up inheriting from family. So you may be doing some real deep inner work around family, around home, around roots, around your sense of safety, security internally, your sense of feeling like you're able to kind of be yourself in your own space. So having that space to just kind of relax, to work through internal stuff. And you're going to be able to look at this from a lot of different angles with the various different planets coming through the fourth house. So I really wouldn't be surprised if there's something there about things that might go back a bit, matters of the past that are coming up to just be seen, be looked at, be worked through. The thing with that is when those things are getting supported by Jupiter and Saturn, that's really, really lovely. That's really functional. That's kind of getting to the heart of the matter. It's almost like peeling away a lot of layers, a lot of past layers, so that you can push forward in an emotionally and spiritually and even psychologically stronger ground, basically, from which to function. So there's this emotional clearing, basically, of your subconscious and even of your line, your past, where you come from. I almost wonder if there's going to be more connections to family. This is happening around what we would conceive of as holiday time in a lot of the world. And if you are seeing, witnessing, observing family kind of through a different lens, this may also be clarifying some of that. So the timing may come through in a way that's very helpful, very effective to see how some of those patterns play out, maybe between family members, and whether or not that really feels like it's healthy or aligned, all of these different questions that can come up with that. And that may be where some of those boundaries are coming in. And this may not necessarily have to be this big thing that you need to make some big stand about, but just kind of recognizing again, where do you end and others begin? So this could also wind up coinciding quite a bit with spiritual study with Jupiter in your 12th. That's definitely speaking to that. Saturn in your 8th could have you taking a lot more seriously what's beyond the veil, what it is, what energies you're able to connect to and are connected to, and how what you're connected to has an impact on you. So along those lines as well, I wouldn't be surprised if you're kind of spending more time at home in private and solitude, working through a lot of that. So yeah, just being as open, as honest with yourself about all of this as you can be in a very gentle way. Again, Saturn in Pisces is all about boundaries, and it's taking place in a house of yours where boundaries are really important, because we can absorb a lot of troubles and kind of issues and things with other people from that place, from that 8th house. And there's this inner vision with Jupiter in your 12th that's also really supportive of seeing things a little bit deeper than usual. And then those inner planets going through Scorpio, which needs to be super, super honest with itself about what it's seeing, what it's feeling, what it's actually wanting, and honoring that, basically. So yeah, creating that new sense of emotional boundaries, drawing that line and then trusting yourself to enforce it as necessary, and feeling that you're able to really rely on yourself, on your own perception of situations, to know what's really good for you, to know what just doesn't feel right instinctively, and then be able to respond accordingly. But yeah, other than all of that, again, this is really wonderful for developing spiritually, developing spiritual practice. Jupiter's going to be helping you with that for quite a while. And I would expect that there's going to be a lot to do with home and family. And it's going to be a lot of moving parts, basically. These are the inner planets that are moving through your 4th in this really meaningful way. So there may be a lot of, like I said, connections, communications. You may be spending more time with other family members where for some reason there's this internal processing of what it is that you're seeing in that area throughout this period of time in order to give yourself a greater understanding of where you stand, and also to firm up that ground beneath you, basically, to trust, again, your sight and your instincts on what's going on energetically within those more private spheres of family and things like this. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Leo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Virgo, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 3rd, 7th, and 11th houses. So for you, this is going to be fundamentally social in nature. There's likely to be a lot of movement and development of your connections with other people. So partnerships, group alliances, friendships. This could also speak to a romantic partnership, certainly, but there's going to be a lot of communication that's going on that's going to underpin a lot of this. So you may be coming into contact with a huge amount of new different types of people that are somehow informing a lot of this. So you may be getting involved with community and then deepening your ties with your community, deepening a sense of belonging with those around you, deepening a sense of understanding with those around you as well, communicating very honestly, communicating a lot, probably. So you may feel very socially busy, and like there's a lot of events and things that are going on that you're having to manage a lot of different moving pieces. And there may be a managing of people aspect to this that's going to be really significant and important. Like you may be stepping into something of a leadership role when it comes to those around you. And I would just recommend doing so in a compassionate, emotionally mature way. And I don't mean that in a pointed way at all, but that's definitely a factor here, is like bringing a sense of being emotionally grounded, emotionally anchored when you're dealing with other people. I mean, with Saturn going through your 7th house for the last little bit of time here, it started in March of 2023. It actually moved into Aries this year. It's moved back into this place. So this is our last little push of Saturn and Pisces in your 7th house. There may be someone that needs help, that you're helping to address certain things for them, that you're being a really good friend with Jupiter in your 11th house. And that may seem like there's a lot of give there, like giving, but you may find that there is actually a lot of benefit to you being a really good friend and being a really good listener throughout this period of time. You may actually be able to see through some of the complications of someone else. Like you may have a friend that comes to you, or someone that comes to you that has, XYZ problem. And as they're explaining it to you, you're just kind of able to see through different aspects of it and say, well, maybe it's actually this that is bothersome within this area, and kind of open them up to seeing it in a different way. You may very well also have opportunities to connect with a spiritual community specifically throughout this period of time too. Again, feeling like you really belong. So development of long-term relationships or partnerships, that's another thing that Saturn can point to. Now, it may have pulled some people away, or it may have stretched or pointed out where you're growing in different directions from some other people in recent years, but it can also really solidify, crystallize some long-term, more serious, more significant connections for you as well. And that can be romantic relationships, friendships. This can be business partnerships as well, that should be pretty reliable. And yeah, like I said, you could feel like there's a lot of responsibility as well with that Saturn and then these other alignments, a lot of responsibility that you're carrying with regard to other people, which could definitely indicate with these inner planets moving through the 3rd that there's this kind of proliferation of your connection. So expansion of your networks, expansion of those beneficial connections or friendships that are really beneficial to you as well. But the way that it may feel in the immediate is well, I'm kind of responsible on some level for managing different energies throughout this time when it comes to other people. And yeah, like I was alluding to, emotional depth and insight in your communication, seeing things just a little bit differently, kind of seeing under the surface as to what's really going on with certain people. Again, especially if that Saturn winds up coming through as someone coming to you with an issue, kind of seeking counsel or seeking your advice or guidance. I think being really honest and in a sensitive way with that Jupiter and Cancer in your 11th is going to help more than you may even assume initially. One way that I could see this potentially kind of playing out too with the way that these things are aligned is, like I said, where Saturn may have shown where you're growing in different directions with other people, and yet it can also solidify some serious connections for you long term, those that are really going to stick with you. This could also point out little habits and tells of people that might not all hit in a way where you're like, yeah, let's have more of that. Let's connect more with this person. Like the things that you're seeing that are below the surface, which are probably going to feel like details and, small stuff that you're picking up on. That Jupiter in your 11th, yes, it does proliferate. It does grow partnerships and connections, basically, with friends and people who are mutually beneficial. But a Jupiter up there could also help to point out where there may be, and I hate to use the term, but where there may be like a snake in the grass. So I wouldn't be shocked to see something like that either. Especially like this clarity and depth in mental patterns, thought processes. That third house also speaks to your thought process. So what's going on like through your mind at any given time, and patterns when it comes to that as well. So there's this aspect of pattern recognition that's going on here. And that could have to do specifically with some other people on a concrete level with regard to specific people. But it could also speak to patterns of how you relate to people that you may also want to transform or change or address kind of differently or carry yourself a little bit differently. Something along those lines, like if you have a tendency to not speak up that much and kind of just let things go, there may be something of a, I don't want to say a lesson, because I feel like it's more of an insight, really, that you're getting into if there are any complications with connections with other people, which Saturn can certainly point to. There's an insight here as to where some of that may be rooted. And I would imagine for sure there's going to be some insights on communication and how that goes and how that's feeding into how relationships tend to go. And that's all just then feeding into this kind of maturation of how you relate to others, how you express your needs, being more comfortable with that. Also being a good friend to yourself. Like Jupiter and Cancer in your 11th, there's this other aspect of that house, which has to do with aspirations, goals, dreams, things like this. And usually beneficial people show up there, especially when Jupiter's there. And so in fact, you may actually have some helpful conversations with others as well that help to clarify, again, those mental processes, how connections go, things like that. But serving your goals and your aspirations, how is it that your communication, that your connection, that your expression of that serves that or doesn't? And how is it that how you relate to others or how you value yourself within relationships, things like that, either support that or don't, if that makes sense. So how does the social feed your aspirations, and how maybe does it fall short of that at times? Getting really clear about that to be able to be a really good friend to yourself as well, with Jupiter and Cancer in your 11th, and a good friend to your aspirations and your goals through taking a really honest approach, especially with like Mercury and Saturn, that trine that's going on between your third and your 11th, being really honest with yourself about, do you sometimes distract yourself a bit with other people's issues out of maybe a fear of success? Something along those lines as well could definitely wind up feeding into this. But with the Mercury retrograde there, that should, I mean, in terms of your communication, that may be a little bit maddening. For sure, you may trip over words. There may be Freudian slips. There may be like, there's little short circuits in the brain that sometimes come through with the Mercury retrograde. Those do tend to be a bit amplified when it's in the third house, but it does also have you really look specifically at your thought process in many different ways, really. So pulling back the layers of how your thoughts wind up developing, who or what may have a strong impact on that. And then if that is good, then wonderful, gratitude for that. But this may also be pointing out little issues that can be solved along those lines, especially with the trines to Jupiter and Saturn there. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Libra, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 2nd, 6th, and 10th houses. So this has a lot to do with your working life, your routines, and how they are serving both your resources as well as your goals, your aspirations, your ambitions in life. So if you are on a traditional kind of career path, this is going to speak primarily to that. Your resources, your income, your daily working life, your work day, as well as those goals of yours that you're trying to achieve, your position, your role, your reputation. So this is a pretty cool alignment here. Having Saturn in your 6th, it's been there for quite a bit, so it may feel like you have been working through structure, discipline in your work, your health, your routines, throughout the past couple of years, since like March of 2023 that you've had Saturn there. It moved into your 7th, but it now has moved back into the 6th to come back to this area a bit and align with Jupiter in your 10th. And that's what makes this a little bit more pleasant of an experience perhaps than Saturn has been in your 6th before. So with the trine from Saturn to Jupiter, this is speaking to the fact that that structure, that discipline is reinforcing growth. It is pushing you toward your goals. There's this recognition, this payoff, this boost to your reputation due to the effort, the discipline, the work that you've been putting into things, your level of organization, your level of focus and discipline and dedication, determination to get things done and to do things really correctly. So this can definitely speak to a really well-deserved raise, promotion, more clients, certainly more work. With Saturn still in your 6th house, you may still feel like, okay, I'm really busy, but hey, at least I can see how this is paying off now. And that may also, I hate to say it, but that may also be something that winds up coming in time. So if there's not immediate payoffs, which I think there's going to be some interesting movement. We're about to talk about what's going on in the 2nd house as well. But if you should just be able to see like, okay, I can see that there's at least movement in the right direction here. It may not come full force quite yet. It may take some time to cook, without a doubt. When we're dealing with Jupiter and Saturn, it's more about long-term lasting benefits and payoffs than it is an immediate kind of a windfall. But there is still a lot of motivation, a lot of dedication, a real like functional efficiency to how it is that you're pursuing your goals and the work that you're putting into that, the dedication and focus and effort that you're putting into that. And with all of these inner planets, Mars, Mercury, the Sun, Venus, they're all coming through your 2nd house simultaneously, and they're aligning to Saturn and Jupiter in their own time. So when Mars comes through, Mars will come through first. I named them in the order basically that they're coming through. That may wind up aligning as a lot of financial, material, resource-based motivation. So this could be hearing about a raise. This could be hearing about some kind of financial opportunity, something like this. This could be getting really focused and dedicated on developing your resources, what it is that you're bringing to the table. So you may be developing a skill or perfecting something along those lines and feel really motivated to do that from that resource security, stability standpoint from your second house there. That's what takes place in the second, is your resources, your values. So what's of value to you, income questions, your possessions, but also your skills and what you bring to the table and things like that. So that emotional kind of motivation may really get kicked off by Mars coming through here. And then there's a bit of the edge taken off of that as the Sun and Venus come through here. It becomes a little bit more flowing. Mercury going back and forth may have you evaluating back and forth what you're really valuing. What is it that you're trying to get out of the effort that you're putting in and the reputation that you're building for yourself? Is it strictly financial, or is there an aspect of, well, I would like to feel more free? That's often an underlying, like, core true reason why we tend to pursue wealth and things like that. So do you want more time, more freedom, more emotional connection, feeling more like emotionally or spiritually aligned with your work, to have your work reflect your values, things like this? So thinking that through quite a bit as Mercury goes retrograde and aligns with Jupiter and Saturn repeatedly throughout, especially the late October, November timeframe. So I wouldn't be shy to question yourself along those lines. That should be a really fruitful process of just thinking that through, taking that seriously. What is it really that you're wanting to get out of what it is that you're putting out into the world? This should also be really supporting your sense of self-worth, your sense of being able to take care of yourself, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, things like this. You should be seeing that quite a bit more, and that should help then to boost your sense of self-worth, is through your ability to be really practical, dedicated, disciplined, as necessary, as it winds up serving your sense of feeling aligned in your life and successful. So tying the reward really to the self-worth boost that you wind up developing throughout this process of being really focused in this area of your life regarding questions of success and how you see that and how you create that for yourself. And yeah, ultimately, this is going to wind up crystallizing a sense of greater purpose of why it is that you bring your dedication, why it is that you are pursuing the paths that you are, what service you feel like you are providing in this life, and how you motivate yourself along those lines. Like, not just what is it that you are providing as a service to others, but also as a service to yourself. I think we can focus a lot on the material aspects of that when we are needing to push through work and things like this. We can see that kind of material success as very paramount, as, well, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's my income. But maybe if we're able to look at it a little bit more as, this is supportive to me and my life, my lifestyle, my comfort, my security, my emotional well-being from knowing that I'm on solid ground, things like this. If you're able to look at that in more of an emotional or spiritual way with the water signs here, I think that that's going to help long-term to motivate you toward those goals, toward that personal growth, toward your aspirations. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you, Libra, with this. So it is ultimately a super beneficial alignment here, but again, it might feel like there's quite a bit of work that winds up going into it. So I hope that this alignment treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Scorpio, we have the water grand trine taking place between your first, fifth, and ninth houses. So these are very lovely houses. They have a lot to do with your spirit, your growth, your sense of inspiration, and coming back to yourself and what you truly enjoy, what you truly feel aligned with and connected to. So there's likely to be a lot of underlying emotional healing, a lot of inspiration that is being felt throughout this period of time. There may be opportunities to really expand your horizons, either with Jupiter up in your ninth house. This could be travel. It could be travel to water, certainly with Cancer there. This could be something of like an emotional or a spiritual journey that you're going through, either physical or internal. But this could also be pushing yourself to expand your horizons in terms of your higher mind. So studying something, getting really invested and interested in a topic that you feel grows you personally. So there would be that personal connection to whatever this is that you're learning about, that you are developing. I mean, you may really be connecting to something that winds up revealing a bigger part of yourself that maybe you haven't been fully aware of or fully connected to up until this point. So this could be a spiritual tradition, this could be a culture, this could be a hobby or an interest, really anything that you feel is just it's a part of you, and possibly a part of you that you haven't really gone all in on yet. So a lot of inspiration along those lines, but also with Saturn in your fifth, the helpful aspect of that is that it can be very disciplined and dedicated to developing those kinds of interests that inspire you. So running with that, taking that thread, really putting a lot of effort into developing an interest, a hobby, a skill, a perspective even, and also taking seriously your joy, taking seriously the fact that we're here to live and enjoy our lives. I know we get really caught up in like the rat race, to use a cliche, the kind of wonky values that we feel like we need to kind of live in accordance with in order to live in this world. But, our lives really are our own, and they are really meant to be enjoyed. And Saturn in your fifth house will be underpinning that understanding of being able to prioritize, being able to really give its due what society sometimes suggests is frivolous, which is our interests, our hobbies, our love of life, our joy. Being able to have those moments of childlike joy. This could even be being able to connect with your children if you have children, making time for that, taking a lot of pride in the, responsibility of taking care of yourself and those you love. And basically what all of this is connecting to is you, the energy that you are bringing to bear upon these areas of life, with the inner planets going through your first house specifically, which is you. The energy that you are bringing to bear on that is feeding back into your sense of self. So all of that emotional healing, connecting to joy, things like that, the inspiration, the personal growth, the expansion of your horizons and everything, you are definitely feeding your energy into that. But it's also coming back to you and reminding you of who you are, what drives you, what motivates you, what you love to do, how you want to see yourself, who you want to be. So yeah, like I said, this may have something to do with travel or higher learning. Also, publishing comes through in the ninth house as well. So that may be a factor here of putting out there into the world something that you love and your personality into that as well. So certainly this could be social media that you are publishing through, or this could be a creative endeavor that you are developing, as in like a book or art or creativity or music or something like that, that you're intending to publish or that you would be publishing around this period of time. Something really self-expressive that you're putting out into the world. This is a good time to either work on those things or put those out there, as that feedback loop is going to come back around to a sense of confidence in your self-expression as well. And yeah, when it comes to those creative projects that you hopefully have been working through with Saturn in your fifth house. Not only are those solidifying now, but they're also being really reinforced by these other alignments. So maybe there's something that you've been pursuing just out of the joy of it, and you're now recognizing how much you have grown through the process of developing a skill or an interest, a hobby, something along those lines. And again, that then feeding back into a sense of personal meaning with that, personal joy in the process, but also of yourself, and feeling really like you're aligned with the energy that you're putting out into the world. So other than all that, I would also say you may feel like there's a lot going on for you personally, or even this could be on both sides, which sometimes can definitely happen, where there's a lot going on internally for you, a lot of spiritual developments, insights, aha moments, a lot of inner work that's going on that you are kind of being presented with, like it might just be time for you to develop in certain ways spiritually. And a lot of people that are coming to you, that you're connecting with, looking at yourself differently, wanting to bring your energies to bear in so many different ways. You may feel quite busy. You may feel like there's a whole lot going on, given the fact that you've got all of these planets going through your first house throughout this time. So I would watch a bit for potential burnout or overcommitment, things like this. Ultimately, what you should be kind of focused on right now is your own interests and things like that. So if it feels like there's a lot coming at you and you're not really inspired by a lot of it, I wouldn't be too shy to be choosy about what it is that you are deciding to put your energy into throughout this time, because it is a really wonderful window of time that you're able to utilize for your spirit, to feed your spirit in so many different ways. And so I would really try to utilize it to that end. But yeah, I think that that's pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I hope that these transits treat you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally a very personal, private, spiritual, emotional kind of process that's going on during this period of time, and a lot of focus in those areas. So with Saturn in your 4th, you may be feeling very anchored through this time, which should be quite helpful and interesting, because you've had Saturn in your 4th house for the better part of a few years here. Since March of 2023, Saturn was going through that 4th and focusing your energy on like the ground beneath you, trying to shore that up, trying to solidify that, trying to create a safe and a sound space for you to be in and work from, basically. This could be work and effort and processing that you've done about your past, about family patterns, about your ancestral line, about where you come from, and things like this, for sure. But now that's aligning really nicely with Jupiter up in your 8th house as well. So while, yes, I'll throw out there could be something about inheritance or property, things like that, ties that you have, financial ties, financial commitments that you have with family, certainly that could wind up being a major factor here. But there's something much deeper that's going on here that I want to kind of focus on through most of this, at least, where that Jupiter in your 8th house should be helping you to feel safer developing spiritual connections as well. So this is an area that's kind of beyond the veil, but also really outside of yourself with Jupiter in the 8th. So you may be studying a lot spiritual development or esoteric topics and things like this that are feeding into your sense of feeling spiritually grounded, or feeling a greater sense of spiritual kind of cohesion, comprehension, understanding, knowledge, wisdom, So that's what a lot of this is really feeding into as well. You may even feel that you are connected spiritually to ancestors or to your roots in some way. And the inner planets are coming through your 12th house. And this is the place of your unconscious, but it's also the place that's it's beyond the veil, but within. It's fundamentally connected to you. So this can be a sense of spiritual guidance that is kind of personal to you. This can speak to periods of solitude, reflection, healing. Now realizing I literally just said those three words that I have here. I wasn't reading. But yeah, basically I'm kind of getting to that first point there of there's this really wonderful alignment for spiritual development through solitude, healing, reflection. And there's the sense of feeling connected to something that's beyond you that may well, with that Saturn in the fourth, pointing to where you come from, feel that it's ancestral in nature as well, or feel like somehow this is informed by family tradition or something like that. And with specifically the inner planets going through your 12th house, this is along the lines of feeling an underlying urge or an instinct, or feeling driven subconsciously to develop yourself, to heal yourself, to reflect internally. Mars may come through and drive that up as a major motivational factor, something that's really strong that's coming up within you to desire to address the 4th house, 8th house aspects, which do speak a little bit more to what it is that you pick up from family, or that line, basically. But then with Mercury, the Sun, Venus coming through here with that big Mercury retrograde that's going to be taking place in this area as well, I would expect that there's going to be a lot of interesting insights that seem to come kind of like flashes out of the blue, or just like insights that seem to come out of nowhere, that come through in those moments of solitude, reflection, quietude, basically, and just connection, spiritually connecting. This could be a really wonderful period of time, if not for specific meditation practices, then again, just that quietude, connecting, listening, really listening spiritually to the information that's coming through for you. That's going to be really healing what's coming through. And particularly to anything that is around patterns from childhood. So that also being an aspect of this home family stuff that's coming through. There may be family patterns, or there may be family conditioning that you picked up on when you were young that's a part of your subconscious now that's coming through. It's speaking to you. It's pointing itself out and connecting in with Jupiter and Saturn, which are really helpful for healing that. And that may be healing on a personal, private level just for you, maybe even some forgiveness, things like that coming through with that. But it could also definitely speak to your connections with family. So when it comes to matters of family or home, feeling a sense of emotional security and expansion, deepening of those connections, that can also reinforce and feed back into that inner transformation, those emotional breakthroughs that are happening in your 12th house too. And you may even be recognizing the emotional or spiritual tumult that others in your family may experience. So this could have you recognize, okay, I see that there's a pattern here from family that might be complicated, but I can see why that's coming through with specific people based on their experiences and things like that. I always tread lightly when it comes to actually addressing this stuff with people, because that can be difficult. And sometimes we have expectations that are not met by other people who are not wanting to put in the work to recognizing that and so forth. But you may be able to offer some counsel. You may be able to offer some kind words or some support to family members as well that may be in their own patterns that they're not recognizing. And that could also be a two-way street where someone is kind of saying something that hits a little bit hard, but that when you are able to look at that in private, in solitude, you can see that there's at least some kind of a nugget of something valuable that you're able to take out of that, to develop from that, basically. So yeah, deep releasing of subconscious patterns, especially with those trines between Jupiter and those outer planets in the 8th and 12th. These are places really beyond rational cognizance, basically. You're not just able to look at these and derive evidence from them. There's a digging or it comes in time, which can be frustrating, kind of an aspect to those. These are very spiritual places, and they are places where the lessons, the insights, they come through when we're ready for them. So I would expect that you're very ready for a lot of that. And then the releasing of certain patterns that wind up presenting themselves to you from those places as well. But yeah, ultimately, this is about developing supportive structures, supportive alignments, even if it is pointing out, I don't want to say friend and foe within your connections, but, perhaps on some level, maybe that's just an extreme way of saying that, pointing out where the support system is. A lot of that may be you. A lot of that may be spiritual, but there may be some people who are showing up in a way, showing you basically that on some level, at least, they can also be relied upon to be reasonable and supportive and engage with you in a healthy way that can be very supportive for your emotional foundations and those mutual emotional foundations between you and other people, as well as creating those new structures for privacy, for some boundaries and things like this as well. And yeah, now I'm just trying to think. Yeah, inheritance can be a thing that comes through when we're dealing with 4th house, 8th house topics. There could potentially, on another kind of literal level, be a partnership where there's a greater sense of security materially within that, that's giving you a sense of having a stronger foundation beneath you, such that you're able to relax internally more and do some processing. Sometimes we feel like we're just really busy because we're trying to keep up with things. If you have, for instance, a partner who is reaching a greater sense of financial security, or that there's information that comes through, maybe there's an inheritance on their side or something like this, where you're not needing to worry about your foundation, that can then create the kind of scaffolding through which you're able to just relax into that 12th house and have some really wonderful, supportive subconscious insights come through as well, that sometimes we're caught up in the noise of everyday life and trying to keep up with things and can't really listen to that as much. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So yeah, I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 3rd, 7th, and 11th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally social. It's about your connections with other people, your partnerships, the groups that you are involved with, your community, communication, things like this. So it's very likely with Jupiter in your 7th house that there's this kind of improvement, at the very least, of some of your connections, your partnerships, your relationships. Now, I don't like to tell Jupiter how it wants to improve connections. So this could be clarity around certain connections, but it does often wind up pointing to a proliferation or a deepening or a greater emotionality or emotional connection, I should say, to the partnerships, the relationships that you have, that you're focused on. Now, this can also speak to business partnerships. So in terms of that proliferation, this could speak to a greater ability to create abundance with other people. So being able to get on the same page with people quite well, but also if you do have a business partnership or something along those lines where you're working with other people toward common goals, this would be really helpful to making that really fruitful. With Saturn in your 3rd, You could feel like there's a lot of responsibility upon you to handle the day-to-day goings on with other people. So you could be managing some kind of a project or feeling like you are managing family members or managing community concerns or something like this, group concerns. You may feel like it's kind of falling upon you to know the ins and outs of situations and to communicate between people, be kind of like the bridge or the anchor between different people, especially if you are involved in any sort of group projects or a working team, basically. You may feel like it's kind of falling upon you to handle a lot of the communicative or administrative aspects of that as well. Now, the inner planets going through your 11th house, the 11th house has more to do with beneficial group relationships, group dynamics, things like this, friends, allies, people who help you out, who you are able to help out. So there's a lot of movement around that area. You may have your friends having a lot going on. There could be a lot of events planned or activities, basically, that you are being requested to participate in. And that should be really nice and helpful. I would recommend with this alignment saying yes to quite a bit of stuff like that. You could be meeting new people. There could be like additions to groups that you're involved with, or just connecting with people when you're out socializing. And there's this kind of solidification of a long-term benefit that winds up coming out of those connections. So when it comes to goals or when it comes to projects or things like this, you could be coming into or like kind of serendipitously meeting people who are able to help you out with certain aspects of that too. People who are of like mind, people who have similar goals or interests or things like this, that it feels really good and it feels productive and, like I said, fruitful to connect with those people. So yeah, expansion in friendships, community, group involvement. You may be finding that you're wanting to get more involved in community outings and things along those lines. And I would definitely recommend leaning into that around this time, because this grand trine just looks really wonderful and really helpful. And it also looks to me like it would point you in the direction of some connections that you can develop that would be really long term. Yeah, like I said, emotional depth to your connections. Jupiter's doing a lot of that, but there's also a lot of communication, a lot of kind of honest expression up in the 11th house, with Mars coming through there, lighting a fire under you, saying like, hey, let's go out, let's do stuff, let's connect with people. And then Mercury, Venus, the sun coming through this area, that pointing to a lot of different energies, a lot of different people that you are connecting with and communicating with. And with Scorpio there, it's like this kind of honest, authentic communication and connection. Seeing each other kind of for what you are, not feeling like you're really needing to put on a mask, things like that. So bringing that kind of energy to your relationships and to your collaborations throughout this period of time. And yeah, like I said, when we're dealing with, I think I said this to you, when we're dealing with those trines between Jupiter and Saturn, they are building something up long term. So I wouldn't expect for this to be just a kind of flash in the pan, like, oh, we're going to go out and socialize more for about a week or two, and then it'll just go back to how things were. I think there's something that is deeper, that's more long lasting, that's developing in this area. And that can be really healing as well, especially if, for instance, you've been less social since the whole COVID time or things like that. Maybe you've been feeling like, I just don't know if I really want to connect with people so much, given the kind of weirdness, the weird energy in the world right now. I personally feel like connecting in communities is going to be a really important part of how we get through a lot of this weird kind of energy that we've been experiencing. So I wouldn't be shy to open up a bit to people that, again, are like-minded, that have similar goals, similar interests, similar values to you. You may be surprised at what you're able to accomplish together and how you're able to support each other through this time. Because that's another, whole thing with the way that the world is. I hate to remind about it so much, but again, having that emotional support system there, I think is going to be super important to keeping us in a healthier kind of a mindset. so that we're not just looking at the news and thinking, okay, everything is bonkers, everything is going off the rails here, and ground us more in, no, a lot of us are actually still pretty solid. We're still holding our values. We're still trying to live through those values. And a lot of people are really doubling down on those values and wanting to be supportive to other human beings, wanting to really honor and reaffirm the human value, by connecting with each other, by being kind and considerate to each other, and create that kind of energy more in the world. So healing those matters of trust in partnerships or simply with other people, generally speaking. Finding those people that you can trust, that you can be yourself with, and that you can open up with, and who can support you, and who you can put your emotional nurturing kind of energy into as well, which I think is also another aspect of our connections with each other that sometimes we overlook. There's being able to care for people, being able to take care of people and be there for people, I think is also something that's really healing to us. And yeah, ultimately, when it comes to your interests, your values, your goals, your aspirations, your projects, really maturing your voice with Saturn going through your third house for some time now. You've probably been thinking that through quite a bit, of thinking your thought process through, if that makes sense. So connecting with your thought process, connecting with how it is that you kind of decipher different things. So again, all of those mental cycles and things like that, taking that seriously, looking at that, trying to improve upon that. It may have felt like that's been quite a bit of work. Now with these trines, there's benefit coming through. You can see the reward of that. You can see why that's really significant to a greater sense of emotional maturity within your connections. And again, really refining your voice, your expression, certainly, but also refining what is it about connecting with other people that you value. Getting really clear about that. All of this whole alignment is really helpful to that. But yeah, other than all of that, I would just say on kind of a more literal level, tying up some loose ends here, this could also be opportunities to speak, to put yourself out there, to present your ideas in some way, especially if you've been developing ideas with Saturn in your third house, developing your viewpoints on certain things or learning about things. You may need to present that. That should go over quite well throughout this time. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. You may even be a little bit perfectionistic about really refining that message of yours that you're putting out there. Additionally, the 11th house, that's the goals and aspirations aspect that I keep kind of tying back into this, and values, things like this. It is this abstract kind of notion of who we are in the world and how we connect with people, things like this. So there's going to be a Mercury retrograde that's going to be a part of this whole transits going through that area. It's Mercury will go through, it'll catch up with Mars. Basically, they'll go into Sagittarius, and then Mercury is going to come back out of Sagittarius, align with Jupiter and Saturn again, retrograde. And that'll be when Venus is there. That's why we can see here, this is when we have Mercury retrograde and Venus coming through. And then Venus will move on. Mercury will switch directions, go direct, and it will make those alignments on its own. So we are wrapping up with a direct Mercury aligning to these two at the end of this. So if you are rethinking some values, some projects, some aspirations, some goals, some dreams of yours, if that is shifting and changing and transforming and morphing in different ways, one, I would not expect for the first transformation of that to necessarily be the be all and end all. Give it time to cook, give that Mercury time to go back and go forward before you necessarily decide, okay, I'm all in on this, to the exclusion of other new ideas that come through. There's going to be a lot of processing about what you're aiming at here. So It's super supportive. I actually love that we're getting a Mercury retrograde in this, because Mercury is those day-to-day thoughts, the mental processes, the short-term plans and things like this. The fact that it's tying into these longer-term, like, beneficial alignments with Jupiter and Saturn, there's this ability to get really, really, really clear about what we're wanting. And for you, there's a social dynamic to that and a social benefit to it for sure. But it's also feeding into, again, those goals. Those, what is it that I'm wanting to bring to the world? Who is it that I'm wanting to be within this kind of global community, basically? So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. So I hope that this alignment treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Aquarius, we have the water grand trine taking place between your second, sixth, and 10th houses. So for you, this is fundamentally about your resources, your security, the effort that you put into your tasks, your work day, as well as your goals, your ambitions, aspirations, your reputation. So if you are following a traditional career path, this is definitely going to be speaking quite directly to that. If you aren't, then definitely feel free to tweak a lot of what I'm going to say toward it. This isn't just career. This is, what are you trying to create of yourself in the world? So broadly speaking, that is what this speaks to. It's just that our lives tend to push this in the direction of a traditional career path and things like that. So that said, with Saturn in your second playing into this, it's likely that you've been taking your resources and matters of income, matters of what you are bringing to bear, and what you're getting out of that you've been taking that quite seriously, and that you, by this point, hopefully have gotten kind of comfortable with what is it that's truly a priority, what's working for you and what's not. There may have even been some interesting hiccups since about March of 2023 when it comes to your resources, where hopefully on the other side of that little hiccup, you're recognizing, okay, this is also really about making sure that my resources and my values are aligned with each other. That's one thing that Saturn in Pisces is really going to wind up focusing a lot on, is, does this feel meaningful? What's the underlying purpose of creating a sense of, like, material security for myself? Well, it's really about creating that sense of emotional and spiritual security for myself that I'm able to work with and work from. So that is aligned with Jupiter in your sixth house, which is really wanting to improve upon these things. So wanting to get not just your resources and values aligned with each other, but then also have that be informing what your daily life looks like. What does your routine look like? What are your habits? Are they feeding into that sense of security, stability, safety, comfort, things like that? Or do they sometimes get in the way of that? Are there sometimes distractions that kind of pull you away from what is truly important to you? Are there certain habits that you're able to develop that would charge up your ability to accomplish what it is that you're wanting to? The anchor points of this are a little bit more on the day-to-day, the personal level. And then what's happening is that we have the inner planets moving through your 10th house. And this is where that long-term planning, the goals, the aspirations, ambitions, your reputation, your public role basically winds up coming in. And so with the inner planets moving through that area, there's this opportunity to take this personal kind of focus on self-improvement when it comes to your efforts and your resources and things like that. There's these opportunities to realize that on a bigger level. I don't mean, bigger is not really the right word for that. There's like opportunities for recognition that can align a positive, improving flow along those lines for you. So this could definitely speak to some projects, some opportunities that are showing up for you in work. This could be clients, like more clients that are showing up. This could be developing really great word of mouth or people talking you up quite a bit and pointing out and bringing light to the fact that you've been very responsible and that you've been really working on perfecting your skills, your craft, what it is that you are bringing to the table, that you're doing things really well, really cleanly, and in a really dedicated, serious manner. So that's being seen throughout this period of time, opening up potential opportunities for you. There may even be a little spurt in the beginning of this with Mars coming through there because Mars will come through first, Mercury will be on its tail, Mercury goes retrograde, then Venus comes through, aligns with Mercury when it's retrograde, and then Mercury winds up going direct. The sun is also in the middle of that. I forgot to mention that. But as Mars is coming through here, you may actually find that your ambitions are really kicking up quite a bit, like you're wanting that recognition. And so you may kind of stir this up a little bit on your own, where you're making this a bit more public of this is the effort that I'm bringing to the table, and kind of putting that on display in some way. So whereas you may have been really content to work behind the scenes and work quietly for some time, you may be really bringing that to bear. This could be like a marketing push if you like run your own business or something like this. This could be if you are retired, for instance, wanting to see that your daily efforts are pushing you closer and closer to your goals, to what it is that you are ambitious about. So your aspirations, what you're aiming for throughout this period of time, wanting to see that realized. And so kind of lighting a fire under you when it comes to that, pushing for that recognition. And then, yeah, with the sun and Venus and Mercury coming through this area, there is a lot of witnessing of that, connecting with people, creating that feedback loop to where hopefully by the end of this, again, if you've been bringing in this really excellent effort, dedication, and things like that, that could wind up being part of the Saturnian payoff to that transit through your second house. Often if we're really dedicated, we don't really make a stink about things. We just kind of put in good, clean effort, keep our head down, focus on what it is that Saturn is trying to have us focus on. There is usually a benefit at the end of it, which when it's going through your second house, if you are being really responsible with your resources and things like this, this could even speak to a promotion or a raise or, again, more clients or something like that. And that feeding into, with the water signs here, a sense of not just that career growth, but also a sense of emotional satisfaction, that feeling aligned with your values. In terms of where you're going, feels aligned, but also the effort that you're putting in feels emotionally satisfying. And it feels like it's like the energy is flowing back to you, basically. So yeah, also addressing any emotional hangups or things like that when it comes to security, service, being seen, success, things like that. So if you have struggled to ask for more, if you have struggled with like the way that you look at money, the way that you look at security, the way that you look at deservingness and reward and things like this, working on that on an emotional level should also be really helpful to being seen for what it is that you're bringing to the table throughout this period of time too. There may also be aspects of health with Jupiter coming through your sixth house that's feeding into this. So the health of the connection that you have with the people that you work with, certainly being nurturing, being considerate. Hopefully you're also receiving that back. That would be something that Jupiter here would indicate, is again, just kind of having people on your side when it comes to your working life or your daily routine. But also when it comes to your health, like having good boundaries and having good organizational systems so that you're able to be more efficient with your work. And then, yeah, like I've alluded to, the values alignment is a really big aspect of this. And that's going to help to encourage better decisions and better prioritization. So again, the efficiency, the solid boundaries when it comes to work, when it comes to making sure that you are asking for adequate compensation, that you are opening yourself up to projects, to opportunities, and things like that. That Saturn in your second house, that's what's really helpful about that, is that as we relax into it, as we allow for ourselves to just be like, well, this is what I'm putting my effort into. This is what I'm focusing on throughout this time. There's this exceptional maturity that we can wind up building up that does help a huge amount with long-term decision making. So what's really a priority, basically, is what that winds up boiling down to. And yeah, this is feeding also back into that Saturn and Pisces in the sense of building up self-worth. So when you are bringing your resources to bear, when you are focused on creating that really good flow, when you are focused on really improving your working life and your working systems, making sure that they're efficient, that you're prioritizing what's really important, that you're working together with others as well as you can, that you're bringing a really wonderful energy and attitude to your working life and to your goals, that you are opening yourself up to success, that you are adjusting your expectations to, this is going to work out for me, this will wind up paying off. That's going to wind up deepening your sense of self-worth and your mindset with regard to success. That's a huge factor here that's getting really supported, not just by the taskmaster Saturn, but it's getting the ability to see the reward of that from these trines, from the 10th house and from the 6th house there, that feeding into your sense of self-worth. But yeah, other than that, your working life, it is likely to be busy. You're likely to have a lot to do, a lot of people that you're kind of needing to manage energies and things like that, whether you're working or not. If there are any projects that you're working on, if there's anything that you're kind of putting out into the world, there's likely to be a lot of movement with all of that as well. And the reputation that you have built for yourself and that you are building for yourself should also be paying off quite a bit throughout this time. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Pisces, we have the water grand trine taking place between your 1st, 5th, and 9th houses. So this is for you fundamentally about yourself, your spirit, your inspiration, your personal expansion and growth, your joy, your interests. So these are really wonderful houses to have highlighted. I have to say this is my favorite triad of houses. And there's likely to be a lot of rewards coming through for what has been a pretty long transit of Saturn through your 1st house at this point. So it first entered your 1st house back in March of 2023. And I'm sure that since then there's been a kind of long process of personal maturation of how it is that you see yourself, how you view yourself, how you carry yourself, a sense of greater personal responsibility and authority over yourself. And the work, the effort that you've put into that is likely to pay off quite a bit throughout this period of time and going forward. So now finally with that Saturn aligning with Jupiter in your 5th house, likely to see some really wonderful long-term rewards when it comes to your ability to experience a sense of joy that is rooted in an accurate view of yourself, as well as a sense of being able to express yourself really authentically, come from a place of authority, but also, again, positivity, joy, lightheartedness, that kind of Piscean nature that you bring to the table. Jupiter is also reinforcing that aspect of what Saturn has pointed out about what really matters. Because we tend to look at Saturn as this taskmaster of the responsibility, the maturity, all of those kinds of things. But it does also bring us back to what's really significant, what's really important here. And in reality, outside of this, society that we've created for ourselves, that really is enjoyment of life. What is the energy that we're bringing to certain situations? Taking a lot of personal responsibility for that, taking personal responsibility for our joy, I think is a really important aspect of what Saturn can bring in terms of, do you feel aligned? Is this really a priority? Is this really aligned with your values? That, I think, is something that Saturn tends to ask us, that sometimes we can wind up overlooking. But Jupiter in a trine to that is not going to allow us to really overlook that. So that's really helpful. And that joy and expansion, potentially through creativity, potentially through your children, if you have children or there are children around, that really then reinforcing what Saturn has brought up, which is that strengthened identity, personal boundaries, sense of self, sense of who you are, and feeling like that is more stable and secure for you going forward. You only get this transit to the first house from Saturn every 30 years or so. The fact that on the tail end of it, we're getting this really nice reinforcing grand trine to support that is, I think, going to have that really stick with you in a really wonderful way going forward. I really love that this is in a trine to Jupiter and for Pisces, and that this Saturn is in the first house, because Jupiter rules Pisces. So it is really reminding you about that Piscean nature, about the joy that is in that, you know. Pisces it's ruled by Jupiter. Venus exalts there. It is a wonderful, lighthearted, very goodwill-driven, loving sign, you know. And so, again, that's part of why I feel like that may be an aspect of this Saturn transit that a lot of people have kind of overlooked, is that it is a thoroughly benefic ruled Saturn coming through your first house there. So I think there's a really wonderful reminder about creating a sense of long-lasting joy and expression and creativity, the importance and significance of enjoying life, and not relying upon good timing or specific kinds of circumstances to give you permission to relax into the fact that your life is your own and you should be able to enjoy it as you do. So this is also then getting really highlighted by the inner planets, which are going through your 9th house. So Mars is going to come through there at first, and that may feel like an urge. It may feel like a major motivational factor. It may even feel like a bit of frustration around belief systems. So this could feel like being a little bit misaligned with what you are either around, the energies around. I don't think anyone could blame you in this world right now. But just like there's clearly a spark, there's a catalyst of sorts for you to be delving into this. So it's likely that there's something that is kind of triggering you to dig deeper into your value systems, into your belief systems, into your perspectives, into your worldview, into your sense of your place in the world, and the value of the world, and possibly even like the value of diversity and diverse opinions and things like this. So there may well be that emotional breakthrough, basically what I'm saying, with Mars coming through first. That emotion may be frustration. It could even be, I can't believe that some people believe that, or I can't believe that I felt that in a reaction to something, or something along these lines, where it's ultimately really helpful to see that and to kind of get this kicked off in that way. But then as the sun comes through here, Mercury is doing a big retrograde through this area, which does really reinforce the fact that there probably will be on your part some rethinking of perspectives and belief systems, worldviews, and things like that. And then Venus also coming through this area, bringing you back to that kind of Piscean aspect of I'm also a Pisces. We're really here to be universally loving. We are really here to be able to lean into that sensitivity. And so I really wouldn't be surprised if there's some aspect of the roughness of the world right now where you're being called to connect more again with that love and that kind of heart-based belief system that is much more natural for Pisces. So you may be working that, like the emotional muscles, spiritual emotional muscles of, well, if I'm going to be dealing with energies that are in the world that may not feel completely aligned, maybe I can work up these belief system muscles. Maybe I can look at what certain teachers have said in the past. Maybe I can look at how to stay emotionally and spiritually regulated throughout this period of time and really devote and dedicate yourself to that kind of energy too. So you may be studying that with books or courses, just learning about that YouTube, however it is that you take in information, and having some interesting, really insightful experiences or insight providing experiences along these lines. Like I said, Mars might come through in a way that doesn't feel the most aligned with Pisces. It may come through as eek, So that kind of experience of then reinforcing, oh, okay, this is something I'm not into. So what is it that I need to come back to of yourself, and taking, again, the personal responsibility aspect of that Saturn transit through your first, taking personal responsibility for your emotional, spiritual well-being and value system, things like this. So then also hopefully feeling much more comfortable with expressing your values, sharing that with the world. This may be something that Pisces is really called to do in the coming years, is to kind of express that sense of, okay, let's come back to a sense of inner peace, of love, of creativity, of imagination, of calm. And you may find yourself having opportunities with these inner planets going through the ninth house, speaking out into the world. This is a place of publishing as well, and expressing or disseminating your knowledge, your wisdom, your ideas. That grand trine being anchored by Jupiter in your fifth, your own love and goodwill and joy, and then Saturn, your sense of spiritual responsibility, Saturn in Pisces, that then being expressed outwardly, ninth house, as some major expression of your values and that passion. And this doesn't have to be specifically a spiritual, emotional thing. This could be a creative thing that probably would wind up overlapping with spiritual and emotional stuff as well. But this could be a writing project. It could be the way that you are looking, if you have children, the way that you're raising your children, looking at the world, wanting to reinforce in them your values and hopefully steer them as correctly as possible through certain worldly energies that you may be witnessing with the alignments in your ninth house as well. You may well also be finding some specific spiritual traditions or practices that you really enjoy that feel super, super, super aligned, which is also just super wonderful to connect with throughout this period of time. And yeah, ultimately, this is just building up a greater confidence in your vision, in your spirituality, in your belief system, in your sense of being able to express joy and love into the world regardless, and connect with and feel guided by the energies that do feel joyful to you, and not feeling the need to feel guarded. Because I would imagine that part of what Saturn going through your Pisces first house presumably has brought up for you is questions of boundaries. That is something that Pisces usually needs to work on. And it's also something that Saturn will bring up and mention and point out as, hey, this is significant. Know where that line is between you and others, and where that energetic cord, should probably not wind up crossing too much. Because Pisces does have some trouble with finding those lines. So yeah, also just this kind of instinctive inspiration here. When you do get excited about something throughout this period of time, I would really go with it. This is with the trine between Jupiter and Saturn. This is something that can build long term, that can really offer a sense of a personal foundation for you and your inspiration, your self-expression, your vision, your belief system. And with the inner planets going through the ninth, there's likely to be kicking up just a lot of fascination with topics like higher mind kinds of topics, be it different cultures, different belief systems, different traditions, different practices, different customs, different worldviews, different ideologies, political ideologies, things like that. Maybe you're going outside of the kind of confines of what is considered normal political belief in your own culture or something like that. Maybe you are studying what people believed in the past or what the basis of these kinds of beliefs are. But there's a lot of fascination there. So I would really follow those threads because there's going to be a lot to be gleaned and gained for you on a personal level from that should give you, again, that sense of greater confidence in you, your vision, your self-expression, your inspiration, your instincts. And yeah, finally, you will get, like I said, there's that Mercury retrograde that's going to be a part of this. And that I would expect to have you looking at some values, some belief systems differently. This isn't necessarily a throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing, but I would expect some tweaks along the edges of, wow, I thought this about this person, or I thought this about this group, or I thought this about how things were going to wind up unfolding, or I didn't know about this whole other aspect of a belief system or something like that, that it's being introduced, it's causing you to look at things in several different ways. And that's also going to be really fruitful. That's going to align 3 times that Mercury with that retrograde to both Jupiter and Saturn here. So I'm actually really glad that we get that Mercury retrograde aligning in this way. I think it's going to be stunningly beautiful. But yeah, do keep in mind, there's probably with that in your 9th house, changing your mind about certain things. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.